You're born in the middle of nowhere, tucked away in a patch of dense reeds near a slow-moving river. Your mother chose this spot carefully, hidden from view, close to water, and far enough from anything that might want to eat you. The birthing process wasn't pretty. She was alone, vulnerable, and exhausted. But you made it. You're here, wet and shaking, trying to figure out what these four wobbly things attached to your body are supposed to do. Your first breath burns. The air is cold, nothing like the warm darkness you just left behind. Your mother licks you clean, her rough tongue working over your tiny body, stimulating your circulation and removing any scent that might attract predators. You don't understand what's happening, but her warmth feels right. You press against her side, instinctively searching for milk. When you find it, the relief is immediate. This is what you needed. You're not what most people picture when they think of a deer. You're small, compact, built more like a stocky dog than the graceful creatures people imagine. Your legs are short and sturdy, your body thick and muscular. You don't have antlers. You never will. Instead, your species has something far more unusual. Your mother has them too. Two sharp, curved tusks that jut down from her upper jaw like tiny sabers. You won't develop yours for months, but they're already forming beneath your gums. The first week of your life is spent learning the basics: how to stand without falling over, how to walk without tripping, how to follow your mother without getting lost. She's patient, but always alert. Her head swivels constantly, ears twitching at every sound. You don't know it yet, but this patch of wetland is crawling with things that would love to make a meal out of you. Foxes, birds of prey, wild boar, they're all out there waiting for you to make a mistake. Your mother doesn't stay in one place for long. Every few hours, she moves you to a new hiding spot. Sometimes it's a thicket of bamboo, sometimes a cluster of tall grass, sometimes the shelter of fallen logs. She has a mental map of safe places, routes that avoid open ground, paths that keep you both hidden. You stumble along behind her, your legs getting stronger with each journey. Feeding time is your favorite part of the day. Your mother's milk is rich and fatty, designed to help you grow fast in a world that doesn't wait for anyone. You nurse frequently, taking in as much as you can before she decides it's time to move again. Between feedings, you rest, curled up in whatever hiding spot she's chosen, listening to the sounds of the wetland around you. Water is everywhere here. The ground squelches under your tiny hooves, and shallow pools dot the landscape. Your mother drinks regularly, and you watch her learning. When you're old enough, you'll try to mimic her, lowering your head to lap at the surface. The first few attempts are disasters. You nearly fall in, splash water everywhere, and come up snorting. But gradually, you get the hang of it. The wetland is alive with sounds. Frogs croak from hidden pools, birds call from the reeds, insects buzz constantly. Most of these sounds are harmless, part of the background noise of your world. But some sounds make your mother freeze, her body going rigid with tension. When that happens, you freeze too, instinctively understanding that silence might be the difference between life and death. One morning, you're following your mother along a muddy path when she stops abruptly. Her ears are forward, her body perfectly still. You can't see what she's looking at, but you can feel the fear radiating from her. Then you hear it, a low grunt, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps crashing through the underbrush. Wild boar. Your mother doesn't wait to see how close it's getting. She bolts, and you follow, your short legs working frantically to keep up. The chase doesn't last long. Wild boar are dangerous, but they're not built for sustained pursuit through thick cover. Your mother knows the terrain better, knows which paths to take and which to avoid. She leads you through a maze of reeds and shallow water until the sounds of pursuit fade away. Only then does she slow down, sides heaving from the effort. These close calls become part of your routine. Danger is constant in the wetlands, but so is your mother's vigilance. She survived this long by being careful, by never taking unnecessary risks, by always having an escape route planned. You're learning from her, absorbing lessons that will keep you alive when you're on your own. As the weeks pass, you grow stronger and more confident. Your legs are steadier now, your reflexes quicker. You can follow your mother through thick cover without falling behind, can navigate shallow water without stumbling. The world is starting to make sense. You're beginning to understand which sounds mean danger and which are just part of the background noise. Your diet is changing too. You still nurse, but your mother has started introducing you to solid food. She shows you which plants are safe to eat, which leaves are tender enough for your young teeth, which roots can be dug up and chewed. The wetland vegetation is diverse: grasses, sedges, aquatic plants, tender shoots. You're learning to browse, to select the best parts of each plant, to avoid anything that tastes bitter or strange. Water plants become a specialty. Your mother wades into shallow pools, submerging her head to reach the succulent stems and leaves growing beneath the surface. You watch, fascinated, as she emerges with water streaming from her face, chewing contentedly. When you try to copy her, you get a nose full of water and come up sputtering, but persistence pays off. Eventually, you master the technique, learning to hold your breath and feel around with your lips for the choicest morsels. The seasonal rhythms of the wetland are becoming familiar. Morning mist rises from the water, burning off as the sun climbs higher. Midday brings heat and the constant buzz of insects. Afternoon storms roll in, sending you both scrambling for shelter under dense vegetation. Evening brings cooler air and the sounds of nocturnal creatures stirring to life. Your mother's behavior is changing as you grow more independent. She's less protective now, more willing to let you explore on your own for short periods. But she's also more demanding. If you lag behind or fail to respond quickly to her warning signals, she'll nip at you, a sharp reminder that survival requires constant attention. One afternoon, while browsing near a quiet pool, you encounter another of your kind for the first time. It's an adult male, slightly larger than your mother, with prominent tusks curving down from his upper jaw. Your mother tenses immediately, positioning herself between you and the stranger. The male approaches cautiously, head low, making soft, grunting sounds. This isn't aggression, it's communication, though interaction is brief. The male investigates your scent, acknowledges your mother with a slight nod, then moves on. But it's your first glimpse of what you'll become, your first understanding that there are others like you in this vast wetland. Your mother relaxes once he's gone, but she keeps you closer for the rest of the day. Your own tusks are starting to emerge now, tiny points just breaking through your gums. They itch constantly, making you want to chew on everything. Your mother tolerates your gnawing on her legs and flanks, understanding that this is part of your development. The tusks will grow throughout your life, becoming your primary defense mechanism and your most distinctive feature. The wet season is approaching, and the character of your world is shifting. Water levels are rising, turning familiar paths into streams and creating new channels through the vegetation. Your mother adapts, finding higher ground for resting spots, adjusting her routes to account for the changing landscape. You're learning flexibility, discovering that survival means adapting to whatever conditions you face. Food is more abundant now. The rising water brings fresh growth, tender shoots pushing up through the mud. Aquatic plants flourish in the expanding pools. Your mother spends longer periods feeding, building up reserves for the challenges ahead. You browse alongside her, your appetite growing as your body demands more fuel for rapid growth. But the wet season also brings new dangers. The rising water forces other animals to seek higher ground, concentrating predators in the same areas where you and your mother take refuge. Competition for safe spaces intensifies. Your mother becomes more aggressive, less willing to share prime feeding spots with other deer, more likely to drive off potential rivals. One evening, as you're settling down for the night in a patch of tall grass, you hear something that makes your blood run cold. It's a sound you've never heard before, but something deep in your genes recognizes it immediately: the cough of a leopard. Your mother's reaction is instant and terrifying. She grabs you by the scruff of the neck and runs, crashing through the vegetation with no regard for stealth or silence. The leopard doesn't follow. Maybe it wasn't hunting, or maybe it was after different prey. But the incident leaves its mark on both of you. Your mother's vigilance reaches new levels, and you develop your first real understanding of mortality. Something out there wants to kill you, and only constant alertness will keep you alive. As your third month approaches, you're becoming less dependent on your mother's milk and more capable of finding your own food. Your browsing skills have improved dramatically. You can identify dozens of different plants, know which parts are most nutritious, understand how to process tough vegetation to extract maximum nutrition. Your tusks are more prominent now, useful for stripping bark and digging up roots. Your mother is pregnant again. You don't understand what this means yet, but you can sense the changes in her behavior. She's more irritable, less patient with your attempts to nurse, more focused on feeding herself. The bond between you is loosening, preparing you both for the inevitable separation that lies ahead. The wetland around you is teeming with life now. Other water deer move through your territory, following their own patterns of feeding and resting. You're beginning to understand the social structure of your species, loosely organized, generally solitary, but with complex scent-based communication that allows individuals to avoid conflict and coordinate their use of shared resources. Your scent glands are developing, adding new dimensions to how you perceive and interact with your world. You can smell the markings other deer have left on vegetation, read the messages they contain about identity, reproductive status, and territorial claims. Your mother teaches you to add your own marks to this chemical communication network, rubbing your face against branches and stems to leave your signature. The art of concealment is becoming second nature. You know instinctively how to use your mottled brown coat to blend with shadows and vegetation. You've learned to move silently, to freeze at the first sign of danger, to trust your mother's warnings even when you can't see the threat yourself. These skills will be crucial when you're forced to survive alone. Human activity is a constant background presence in your world. Boats move along the main river channels, fishermen cast nets in the deeper pools, farmers work the fields that border your wetland home. Most humans ignore you, focused on their own activities, but some represent danger. Your mother has taught you to recognize the difference between harmless humans and those who might pose a threat. One morning, you encounter your first poacher's snare. It's a thin wire loop, nearly invisible, positioned along a game trail that you and your mother use regularly. Your mother spots it just in time, stopping short and backing away. She leads you on a wide detour, but the message is clear. Humans can be as dangerous as any natural predator, and their traps are everywhere. Life in the wetlands is preparing you for independence, whether you're ready or not. The lessons are coming faster now. Your mother's patience is wearing thin as her body prepares for new life. She nips at you when you try to nurse, pushing you away with increasing force. The message is clear. It's time to start thinking for yourself. You're 4 months old, and independence isn't a choice anymore. It's a necessity. Your tusks are pronounced enough now to be useful. They're still growing, still sharp, and they've become your primary tools for survival. You use them to strip bark from young trees, to dig up succulent roots from the muddy ground, to defend yourself when cornered. The constant growth means they need regular use to keep them from becoming overgrown. Your mother showed you how to grind them against rocks and hard wood, keeping them at the perfect length and sharpness. The wet season has transformed your world completely. What were once dry paths are now channels of flowing water. What were once small pools are now expansive lakes. The landscape shifts daily as water levels rise and fall, forcing you to constantly adapt your routes and hiding spots. Your mother navigates this chaos with practiced ease, but you're still learning to read the signs that indicate safe passage versus dangerous terrain. Food is everywhere, but so is competition. Other herbivores have been driven into the same high ground areas where you take refuge. Wild pigs root through the mud, disturbing the aquatic plants you depend on. Water buffalo wade through the deeper pools, their massive bodies creating waves that wash away the delicate vegetation along the shorelines. You're learning to time your feeding to avoid these larger animals, to find the spots they can't reach or don't bother with. Your browsing technique has evolved into an art form. You've discovered that the best feeding happens in the early morning, when the night's moisture has softened the vegetation and made it easier to digest. You've learned which plants provide the most nutrition for the energy spent harvesting them. Your mother watches approvingly as you demonstrate your growing expertise, selecting tender shoots over tough stems, choosing young leaves over old ones. The social dynamics of your species are becoming clearer. Water deer aren't herd animals like their larger cousins, but they're not completely solitary either. You exist in a loose network of overlapping territories, maintained through scent marking and occasional direct encounters. Your mother has shown you the boundaries of her territory, the trees and posts where she leaves her scent, the routes that connect feeding areas to resting spots, to water sources. Other females pass through regularly, some with young of their own, others alone. The interactions are usually brief and peaceful, a cautious approach, a few moments of mutual investigation, then separation. But when resources are scarce or territories overlap too much, tensions can escalate quickly. You've watched your mother drive off intruders with aggressive displays, charging with her head lowered and tusks visible, making it clear that this space is claimed. Males are different. They move through the landscape with less attachment to specific locations, following their own patterns of feeding and rest. When they encounter your mother, the interactions are more complex. There's sizing up happening, evaluation of strength and health, assessment of reproductive readiness. Your mother's pregnancy makes these encounters tense. She's protective of her territory, but also preparing for the demands of raising new offspring. Your own scent is changing as you mature. The glands around your face and feet are producing stronger secretions, marking your passage through the wetland with increasingly distinctive signatures. You're beginning to understand the chemical conversations happening all around you, messages about dominance, territory, reproductive status, health, stress levels. It's like learning a new language, one spoken through scent rather than sound. Water has become your element. You're as comfortable wading through chest-deep pools as you are navigating dry ground. Your swimming skills have developed out of necessity. When the water rises, you either learn to swim or find yourself trapped on shrinking islands of high ground. Your mother taught you the basics, but you've refined the technique through practice, learning to move efficiently through the water while keeping your head high and your breathing controlled. Diving for aquatic plants has become a specialty. You can hold your breath for impressive periods, submerging completely to reach the most nutritious parts of underwater vegetation. Your tusks are useful here too, helping you grip and tear away tough roots and stems. The underwater world is peaceful, muffled, a refuge from the constant vigilance required on the surface. Predator awareness has become instinctive. You can distinguish between the sounds of harmless animals moving through the vegetation and the deliberate stalking movements of something hunting. Your ears have developed incredible sensitivity. You can hear the soft pad of a cat's paw on mud, the rustle of a snake moving through grass, the splash of a crocodile entering water from a hidden position. Crocodiles are your most feared predator now that you spend so much time in and around water. They're patient, nearly invisible, capable of explosive speed when they strike. Your mother has shown you how to read the water for signs of their presence, the telltale eyes and nostrils just breaking the surface, the unnatural stillness of floating logs, the absence of normal waterbird activity. You've learned to approach water cautiously, to enter and exit at different points, never to linger in one spot too long. Birds have become your early warning system. The sudden silence of songbirds often indicates a predator's approach. The alarm calls of waterfowl signal danger from above or below. You've learned to interpret these signals, to understand which warnings apply to you and which are meant for other species. When the birds go quiet, you go still. Your mother's increasing irritability signals the approaching end of your time together. She's already begun scouting for birthing locations, investigating secluded spots where she can safely deliver her next offspring. You follow her on these reconnaissance missions, not understanding their purpose, but sensing their importance. Each potential site is carefully evaluated: proximity to water, availability of food, escape routes, concealment from predators. The competition for prime birthing territory is fierce. Other pregnant females are conducting similar searches, and conflicts are inevitable. You watch as your mother engages in territorial disputes, charging and retreating, using threat displays to establish dominance without risking injury. These encounters are teaching you about adult social dynamics, about the delicate balance between cooperation and competition that defines your species. Your own territory is beginning to form in your mind. You're developing preferences for certain feeding areas, certain resting spots, certain routes through the wetland. Your scent marking has become more deliberate, more strategic. You're starting to think like a territory holder rather than a follower, but preparing mentally for the day when you'll need to establish and defend your own space. The changing seasons bring new challenges. As water levels fluctuate, the distribution of food changes too. Areas that were productive last month are now underwater or dried out. Flexibility is crucial. You're learning to adapt your feeding strategy to whatever conditions you encounter, to exploit temporary abundances while they last, to conserve energy during lean periods. Human activity continues to shape your world in ways both subtle and dramatic. New drainage channels appear overnight, altering water flow patterns. Fishing activities increase during certain seasons, bringing boats and nets into areas that were previously quiet. Agricultural work along the wetland margins affects the availability of certain plant species. You're learning to read these human patterns, to understand when and where human activity is likely to occur. Poaching pressure varies with the seasons too. During certain times of the year, snares appear more frequently along game trails. The sound of gunshots echoes across the wetland with disturbing regularity. Your mother's wariness around human scent has intensified, and she's teaching you to associate certain smells with immediate danger: gun oil, tobacco, the particular odor of humans who spend their time hunting rather than farming or fishing. The development of your survival instincts has accelerated. You no longer need your mother's warning calls to know when danger approaches. You can sense it yourself. Your body responds automatically to threats, muscles tensing for flight, breathing becoming controlled and quiet, all senses focusing on the source of potential danger. These responses happen faster than thought, programmed into your nervous system by millions of years of evolution. Your relationship with your mother has evolved from dependence to partnership to growing independence. She still protects you when serious threats arise, but increasingly she expects you to handle minor challenges on your own. When you encounter other deer, she lets you manage the social interactions. When you're foraging, she doesn't guide your choices unless you're making dangerous mistakes. Sleep has become a strategic activity. You've learned to rest with one ear always listening, to choose sleeping spots that offer multiple escape routes, to wake instantly at the first sign of disturbance. Your mother has taught you the art of the power nap, brief periods of rest that restore energy without leaving you vulnerable for extended periods. The wetlands' nocturnal world is becoming familiar territory. Night feeding has advantages: cooler temperatures, fewer human disturbances, different plant chemistry that makes some species more nutritious after dark. But it also brings unique dangers. Nocturnal predators operate with advantages of their own, using darkness and your species' reliance on scent and hearing to their benefit. Your mental map of the territory is growing more detailed and sophisticated. You know which areas flood first when rains come, which routes remain passable when others become impassable, which feeding spots are most productive at different times of day and season. This knowledge base will be crucial when you're forced to survive without your mother's guidance. The final separation is approaching, whether you're ready or not. Your mother's pregnancy is advancing, and her focus is shifting entirely to the demands of bringing new life into the world. Soon, you'll wake up one morning to find her gone, vanished into the reeds to give birth in solitude. When that happens, you'll be truly on your own for the first time in your life, with only the lessons she's taught you standing between survival and death in the unforgiving wetland world. The morning comes when you wake up alone. Your mother is gone, not just out foraging, but truly gone. Her scent trail ends abruptly at the edge of a dense thicket, disappearing into vegetation too thick for you to follow. You wait for hours, expecting her to return, but the silence stretches on. This is it. You're on your own now, and the wetland doesn't care that you're still learning. Your first day alone is terrifying. Every sound makes you freeze. Every shadow could hide a predator. Without your mother's constant vigilance, supplementing your own, the world feels exponentially more dangerous. You move cautiously through familiar territory, sticking to routes you know well, avoiding anything that seems even slightly risky. By evening, you've barely eaten anything, too nervous to focus on feeding for more than a few minutes at a time. The second day is worse. Hunger is gnawing at your stomach, but fear keeps you paralyzed. You attempt to browse in a productive spot near the water's edge, but every few seconds you lift your head to scan for threats. Your feeding is inefficient, interrupted, barely enough to sustain you. When night falls, you huddle in a patch of tall grass, listening to the sounds of the wetland around you and wondering if you'll survive until morning. By the third day, Survival instinct overrides fear. You're starving and you can't afford to be cautious anymore. You wade into deeper water to reach the aquatic plants your mother showed you, submerging your head to grab the tender underwater growth. It's dangerous. You're vulnerable while feeding, unable to hear approaching threats. But you have no choice. You eat quickly, efficiently, then retreat to safety to process what you've consumed. Your first real test comes on the fourth day. You're browsing in a productive area when you hear the unmistakable sound of another water deer approaching. It's a young male, maybe a year older than you, with tusks that are noticeably larger than your own. He doesn't seem aggressive, but he's clearly interested in the same feeding spot you're using. This is your first territorial challenge, and how you handle it will set the tone for future encounters. You don't back down immediately. Instead, you lower your head slightly, displaying your own tusks, small as they are. The male pauses, assessing your response. He could easily drive you off if he chose to, but something in your posture suggests you won't go without a fight. After a tense moment, he turns aside, choosing a different feeding area rather than escalating the conflict. You've won your first territorial dispute, not through strength, but through the willingness to stand your ground. The victory gives you confidence, but it also teaches you about the delicate balance of wetland politics. Direct confrontation is costly and dangerous. Most interactions are resolved through subtle displays of intent rather than actual violence. You're learning to read these signals, to understand when another deer is testing your resolve versus when they're genuinely prepared to fight. Your territory begins to take shape through trial and error. You establish regular feeding circuits, mark key locations with your scent, and develop preferences for certain resting spots. But territory isn't just about claiming space, it's about defending it. Other deer test your boundaries constantly, probing for weakness, looking for opportunities to expand their own ranges at your expense. An older female presents your most serious challenge yet. She's experienced, confident, and clearly accustomed to getting her way. When she moves into one of your prime feeding areas, she doesn't just ignore your scent markers, she actively covers them with her own. This is a direct challenge that can't be ignored. If you don't respond, you'll lose credibility and find yourself pushed out of the best parts of your territory. The confrontation is brief but intense. You charge forward with your head lowered, tusks visible, making aggressive grunting sounds. She stands her ground initially, but when you don't back down, she recalculates. You're young and probably not worth the energy required to subdue completely. She withdraws, but not before making it clear that this isn't over. Territorial disputes are rarely settled with a single encounter. Water levels continue to fluctuate with the changing season, creating new challenges and opportunities. Areas that were underwater last week are now exposed mudflats, rich with invertebrates and sprouting vegetation. Areas that were dry feeding grounds are now flooded, forcing you to adjust your routes and feeding strategies. Adaptability isn't just useful, it's essential for survival. You discover that different water depths offer different feeding opportunities. Shallow areas are perfect for browsing on emergent vegetation and probing for roots in soft mud. Medium depths allow you to wade while reaching submerged plants. Deep areas require diving, but they often contain the most nutritious aquatic growth, untouched by competitors who can't or won't fully submerge. Your diving skills improve rapidly out of necessity. You learn to read water clarity, to judge depth accurately, to maximize your time underwater while maintaining awareness of surface threats. Holding your breath becomes second nature. Your tusks prove invaluable for gripping and tearing tough underwater stems that other herbivores can't handle effectively. Predator pressure varies by location and time of day. Open water areas are dangerous during daylight when raptors hunt from above, but relatively safe at night when most aerial predators are inactive. Dense vegetation provides concealment, but also creates opportunities for ambush predators to get close, undetected. You're constantly calculating these trade-offs, choosing feeding locations based on current risk levels. Your first encounter with a python nearly ends badly. You're browsing in thick cover when something moves wrong in your peripheral vision. It's not quite natural movement, too smooth, too purposeful. You freeze, scanning the area more carefully. Then you see it. Coils of muscled body draped across low branches, perfectly camouflaged until it shifted position. The snake is massive, easily capable of killing something your size. You back away slowly, never taking your eyes off it, until you're far enough away to run safely. The incident reinforces lessons your mother taught you about reading environmental cues. Predators don't just appear randomly. They position themselves strategically, using terrain and vegetation to their advantage. Learning to spot these ambush sites before you walk into them is crucial. You develop an eye for places that look too perfect, too convenient, too much like ideal feeding spots. Birds become your constant companions and early warning system. Certain species of waterfowl feed in the same areas you do, and their behavior tells you volumes about current threat levels. When they're relaxed and feeding normally, the area is probably safe. When they become alert or take flight suddenly, something has disturbed them. You learn to interpret their alarm calls, to understand which warnings are relevant to you. Your relationship with other wildlife is complex. Some species are competitors for the same food sources. Others are neutral coexisters who neither help nor hinder your survival. A few become inadvertent allies. Their feeding activities sometimes expose food sources you couldn't access on your own, or their presence indicates areas that are currently safe from major predators. Wild boar are particularly problematic. They're destructive feeders who churn up aquatic plant beds with their rooting behavior, making areas temporarily unusable for more selective browsers like yourself. They're also dangerous if cornered or surprised, capable of inflicting serious injuries with their tusks and hooves. You learn to recognize the signs of recent boar activity and avoid those areas until things settle down. The seasonal migration of fish brings temporary abundance to certain areas of the wetland. When fish are spawning or moving through in large numbers, they attract concentrations of other wildlife, birds, reptiles, and mammals, all converging on the same locations. These gatherings can be productive if you time them right, but they also increase competition and predator activity. Your foraging efficiency improves dramatically with practice. You develop techniques for processing different types of vegetation quickly and thoroughly. Tough stems require different handling than tender leaves. Root vegetables need to be cleaned of mud and debris. Aquatic plants must be processed quickly before they begin to ferment. You're becoming a specialist in wetland nutrition. Tool use becomes part of your feeding strategy. You learn to use rocks and logs as anvils for breaking open tough seed pods or crushing hard roots. Your tusks function as both weapons and sophisticated harvesting tools, capable of precise cuts or powerful tears depending on what the situation requires. You discover that certain types of wood are perfect for grinding your tusks against, keeping them sharp and properly shaped. Territory maintenance is an ongoing job that never ends. Scent marking must be refreshed regularly. Boundaries must be patrolled and defended. Prime feeding areas must be protected from encroachment. You establish a routine that balances these territorial demands with the basic requirements of finding food and staying alive. Other water deer begin to recognize you as an established territory holder rather than a transient youngster. Your scent signatures become familiar throughout your range. Some individuals avoid your core areas entirely, while others test your boundaries periodically to see if your resolve has weakened. Reputation matters in the wetland social hierarchy. Your first serious injury comes from an unexpected source. While feeding on tough marsh grass, you cut your mouth on a piece of broken metal hidden among the vegetation, probably debris from human activity upstream. The cut isn't life-threatening, but it makes eating painful for several days. You learn to be more careful when feeding in areas where human refuse might be present, adding another layer of caution to your survival calculations. Healing from the injury teaches you about your body's resilience and limitations. You discover which foods are easiest to process when your mouth is sore, which feeding techniques minimize pain, how to maintain nutrition while your body repairs itself. The experience makes you more aware of how quickly a minor injury could become a major problem if it prevented you from feeding effectively. Weather patterns become increasingly important to your survival strategy. You learn to read the signs of approaching storms, to find shelter before conditions become dangerous, to take advantage of the feeding opportunities that follow heavy rains. Different weather conditions favor different types of food and create different risk profiles for various activities. The dry season brings new challenges as water levels drop and food becomes more concentrated in smaller areas. Competition intensifies as all the wetlands herbivores are forced to share shrinking resources. Territorial boundaries become more rigidly enforced. Conflicts that might have been avoided during times of abundance now become unavoidable. You encounter your first human hunter during the dry season. You're feeding in an area of shallow pools when you catch a scent that makes every instinct scream danger. It's not just human scent, it's human scent combined with gun oil, metal, and the particular odor of someone who spends their time killing animals. You don't wait to see what happens next. You run, using every evasion technique your mother taught you, putting as much distance as possible between yourself and that terrifying smell. The encounter leaves you shaken and more cautious around any sign of human activity. You realize that some humans are far more dangerous than others, and learning to distinguish between them could mean the difference between life and death. Farmers and fishermen generally ignore you, but hunters actively seek you out. The distinction is crucial. Your first full year of independence is coming to an end, and you've not just survived, you've established yourself as a successful adult water deer. Your territory is secure, your feeding skills are refined, your predator awareness is finely tuned, but the wetland doesn't allow anyone to become complacent. New challenges are always emerging, and survival requires constant adaptation to changing conditions. The approach of your second wet season brings both familiarity and uncertainty. You know what to expect from the change in water levels and seasonal food availability, but you also know that each year brings unique variations. Weather patterns shift, human activity changes, other animals adjust their behaviors. Nothing stays exactly the same, and successful survival means staying flexible and alert to new possibilities. Your tusks have grown considerably over the past year, becoming formidable weapons and essential tools. They require constant maintenance to keep them at optimal length and sharpness. You've developed a routine of grinding them against specific rocks and tree trunks, keeping them in perfect condition for whatever challenges lie ahead. These tusks are your primary advantage, in a world full of larger, stronger competitors. As the seasonal cycle begins to repeat, you're no longer the confused, frightened youngster who lost his mother a year ago. You're a proven survivor, a territorial holder, a successful adult water deer who has mastered the art of wetland living. But in this unforgiving environment, every day still brings new tests of your skills, your judgment, and your will to survive. The second year of your life brings new complexities that go far beyond simple survival. Your body is maturing, hormones are shifting, and instincts you've never felt before are beginning to stir. The wetland that once seemed vast and mysterious now feels like familiar territory, but familiarity breeds its own dangers. Complacency kills in this environment, and you're learning that success can make you careless if you're not vigilant. Your territory has expanded significantly over the past few months. What started as a small core area around a reliable water source has grown into a network of feeding sites, resting spots, and travel corridors that cover several square kilometers of prime wetland habitat. But expansion brings responsibility. More territory means more boundaries to defend, more scent markers to maintain, more potential conflicts with neighbors who might see your success as an opportunity. The social dynamics of your species become more apparent as you interact with an increasing number of other water deer. There's a loose hierarchy based on age, size, territory quality, and fighting ability. You're somewhere in the middle, no longer at the bottom like a juvenile, but not yet commanding the respect given to the most dominant individuals. Every encounter is a negotiation, a careful balance between asserting your rights and avoiding unnecessary conflicts. A particularly aggressive male has been testing your boundaries for weeks. He's older than you, with tusks that curve menacingly from his upper jaw, scarred from previous fights. His territory borders yours, along a productive stretch of shallow water where aquatic plants grow thick and nutritious. The boundary has been fluid, shifting based on water levels and seasonal availability of food. But now he's pushing harder, moving his scent markers deeper into what you consider your space. The confrontation becomes inevitable when you find him feeding in your most productive pool, the one you've claimed and defended for months. He doesn't retreat when he sees you approaching. Instead, he lifts his head and stares directly at you, water dripping from his chin, making it clear that he's not intimidated. This isn't a probe or a test. This is a direct challenge to your territorial claim. You lower your head, displaying your tusks, but he mirrors the gesture. His tusks are longer, more intimidating, backed by greater body mass and years of fighting experience. Logic suggests you should back down, find somewhere else to feed, avoid a confrontation you're unlikely to win. But territory isn't just about food, it's about credibility. If you retreat from this challenge, every other deer in the area will see you as weak, vulnerable to being pushed around. The fight is brief and brutal. You charge first, hoping to use momentum and surprise to overcome his size advantage. Your tusks clash against his with a sound like breaking branches. He's stronger, but you're faster, more desperate. You circle each other in the shallow water, lunging and retreating, looking for openings, testing each other's resolve. His experience shows. While you're focused on offensive attacks, he's reading your movements, waiting for the moment when you overcommit. When you lunge too aggressively, he sidesteps and rakes his tusks across your shoulder, opening a gash that immediately begins bleeding into the murky water. The pain is shocking, but more shocking is the realization that you're outmatched. You don't run immediately. Instead, you back away slowly, maintaining eye contact, making it clear that you're withdrawing tactically rather than fleeing in panic. It's a fine distinction, but an important one in the complex social calculations of territorial species. He doesn't pursue, content to have made his point. The productive pool is his now, and you'll need to find alternatives. The shoulder wound teaches you about the real costs of territorial disputes. It's not deep enough to be life-threatening, but it's painful and limits your mobility for several days. During that time, you're vulnerable to other challenges, other predators who might see your injury as an opportunity. You feed more cautiously, rest more frequently, and avoid any situation that might require sudden movement or aggressive posturing. Healing gives you time to reassess your territorial strategy. You realize you've been expanding too aggressively, claiming more space than you can realistically defend. Better to hold a smaller territory securely than to lose credibility trying to maintain boundaries you can't enforce. You consolidate your holdings, focusing on the areas that provide the best combination of food, water, and safety. The lesson proves valuable when a young female enters your territory. She's about your age, sleek and healthy, moving through your range with the confident gait of an animal that knows its own worth. Unlike the aggressive male, she's not challenging your territory, she's evaluating it, and she's evaluating you. This is your first serious encounter with a potential mate, and you have no idea what you're doing. Your mother never taught you about courtship. That wasn't part of her survival curriculum. You're operating on pure instinct, and those instincts are telling you to approach carefully, to demonstrate your fitness without appearing threatening. Your first attempts are clumsy. You follow her at what you think is a respectful distance, but she clearly finds your presence intrusive. When you try to feed near her, she moves away. When you attempt to mark territory in her vicinity, she covers your scent with her own. The message is clear. You're not impressing her. You adjust your strategy, becoming less direct, more subtle. Instead of following her, you make sure your territory showcases its best features when she's around. You lead her past your most productive feeding areas, your most secure resting spots, your most reliable water sources. You demonstrate your knowledge of the terrain, your ability to find food even when conditions are challenging. Gradually, her attitude begins to shift. She stops avoiding your presence, starts feeding in the same areas without immediately moving away. When other males approach, she looks to you first, gauging your reaction, allowing you to take the lead in driving off potential competitors. These small signs of acceptance feel like major victories, but courtship in the wetlands is complicated by practical realities. Food must still be found, predators still pose threats, territorial boundaries still require defense. Romance is a luxury that can only be afforded when basic survival needs are met. You're learning to balance these competing demands, to pursue mating opportunities without neglecting the vigilance that keeps you alive. The relationship develops slowly, built on mutual respect rather than dramatic displays. She appreciates your territorial knowledge, your ability to find food in challenging conditions, your willingness to defend shared space against intruders. You admire her efficiency, her calm confidence, her ability to assess situations quickly and accurately. It's a partnership based on practical compatibility rather than passion. When she eventually accepts your advances, the mating is brief and businesslike. There's no prolonged courtship ritual, no dramatic displays of dominance or submission. You approach, she allows it, the act is completed, and then you both return to the serious business of staying alive. In a species where survival margins are thin, reproduction can't afford to be overly complicated. Her pregnancy becomes apparent over the following weeks as her behavior patterns change. She becomes more selective about feeding areas, more cautious about exposure to potential threats, more aggressive toward other females who venture too close to prime territory. You adjust your own behavior to accommodate her needs, sharing your best food sources, providing additional security through increased territorial patrols. The dynamic between you shifts as her pregnancy progresses. She's less tolerant of your presence, more focused on her own survival and that of her developing offspring. You understand instinctively that this isn't personal, it's biological necessity. Her body is directing energy toward reproduction, leaving less available for social interactions that don't directly benefit her reproductive success. When she disappears one morning to give birth, you don't follow. Some knowledge seems hardwired into your brain, telling you that interference at this critical moment would be unwelcome and potentially dangerous. Instead, you expand your territorial patrols, ensuring that the areas around her likely birthing sites remain secure from predators and competitors. You don't see her again for several weeks. When she does reappear, she's alone and noticeably thinner, her body showing the toll of pregnancy, birth, and early nursing. She's also more aggressive than before, quick to threaten any perceived challenge to her space or resources. The demands of raising offspring have transformed her from a potential partner back into a competitor for limited wetland resources. Your own life settles back into familiar patterns of feeding, territory maintenance, and predator avoidance. But something has changed. The successful mating has given you confidence, status among the local deer population. Other males are more respectful of your territorial boundaries, less likely to challenge your claims directly. Younger animals defer to your presence, recognizing you as an established adult rather than an upstart newcomer. This elevated status brings new responsibilities. Younger deer sometimes follow you, learning from your feeding techniques and territorial strategies. You find yourself in the role your mother once played, demonstrating survival skills through example rather than direct instruction. It's strange to realize that you've become the experienced adult that others look to for guidance. The wet season arrives with unusual intensity, bringing water levels higher than you've ever experienced. Areas that were reliably dry become deep pools. Familiar travel routes disappear under rushing currents. The entire geography of your territory is transformed, forcing you to adapt quickly or risk being cut off from essential resources. Your swimming skills, developed through necessity over the past 2 years, prove invaluable during this challenging period. While other deer struggle to navigate the transformed landscape, you move confidently through deep water, accessing food sources that others can't reach. Your ability to dive for submerged vegetation gives you a significant advantage when surface food becomes scarce. But the floods also bring new dangers. Predators are concentrated on the remaining high ground, creating dangerous bottlenecks where conflicts are inevitable. Snakes, displaced from their usual territories, appear in unexpected places. The rushing water carries debris that can injure an unwary animal, and the increased turbidity makes it difficult to spot submerged obstacles or lurking crocodiles. You lose part of your territory to the floods, but you also gain access to new areas that were previously too dry to be useful. The key is flexibility, recognizing when to abandon familiar routines and when to exploit new opportunities. Animals that can't adapt to changing conditions don't survive long in environments as dynamic as wetlands. The high water period also brings increased human activity as people adjust to the changed landscape. More boats move through areas that were previously accessible only on foot. Fishing pressure increases in the newly created deep pools. Government teams arrive to assess flood damage and plan drainage projects. Each human presence brings its own risks and opportunities. You develop new strategies for avoiding human contact during this period. The sound of boat engines carries clearly across the water, giving you advance warning of approaching vessels. You learn to recognize the different types of human activity, some harmless, others potentially threatening. Fishermen generally ignore you, but hunters actively seek signs of your presence. One morning, while feeding in a newly flooded area, you encounter something that stops you cold. It's a trap, but not like the wire snares you've learned to avoid. This is a pit trap, carefully concealed and positioned along what appears to be a natural travel route between feeding areas. The camouflage is sophisticated, using local vegetation and materials to create a nearly invisible hazard. You back away carefully, studying the trap's construction, memorizing its location, and the techniques used to conceal it. Over the following days, you discover more traps scattered throughout the flooded areas, all positioned with careful attention to deer movement patterns. Someone has studied your species' behavior and is using that knowledge against you. The trap discovery forces you to completely reassess your movement patterns. Routes that seemed safe now require careful inspection before use. Areas that offered good feeding opportunities might be death traps in disguise. You develop new habits of cautious investigation, probing suspicious areas with sticks before committing your weight, testing the ground ahead of each step. Your heightened caution pays off when you spot a hunting blind positioned to overlook one of your regular feeding areas. It's well constructed and carefully camouflaged, but your increased awareness allows you to detect the subtle signs of human construction. You mark the location mentally and plan alternative routes that avoid the blind's field of view. The hunting pressure changes your entire approach to territory use. You shift to more nocturnal activity patterns, taking advantage of darkness to move and feed with reduced risk of human observation. Your night vision, always good, becomes crucial for navigating familiar terrain under conditions where human hunters are disadvantaged. But nocturnal activity brings its own challenges. Night predators are active during your feeding times, using their own sensory advantages to hunt in darkness. Owls pose a threat to smaller deer, while ground predators like cats and wild dogs use darkness to mask their approach. You're trading one set of risks for another, constantly calculating which threats are more manageable. Your territorial boundaries become more fluid during this period of increased pressure. Rather than defending fixed boundaries, you adopt a more flexible approach, using the best available resources, regardless of traditional territorial claims. Other deer seem to follow similar strategies, leading to a temporary breakdown of normal social hierarchies as survival takes precedence over territorial disputes. The crisis period teaches you about the difference between thriving and merely surviving. During good times, you can afford to maintain large territories, engage in social interactions, pursue mating opportunities. During bad times, everything becomes secondary to staying alive. Understanding when to shift between these modes is crucial for long-term survival. As the floodwaters eventually recede, you're faced with rebuilding your territory in a changed landscape. Some of your best feeding areas have been scoured away by rushing water. New channels have been carved through familiar terrain. The entire ecosystem is reorganizing itself, creating opportunities for those quick enough to exploit them. You're older now, more experienced, better equipped to handle the challenges of territorial establishment. Your third year of life is beginning, and you're no longer the uncertain yearling who struggled to survive his first season alone. You've become a mature adult water deer, tested by adversity and strengthened by experience. The wetland around you continues its eternal cycle of change, flooding and drying, abundance and scarcity, safety and danger. But you've learned to read its rhythms, to anticipate its moods, to adapt to whatever conditions it presents. So, you've earned your place in this harsh but beautiful world, and you're ready for whatever challenges lie ahead. Your survival has been hard won through countless small victories and narrow escapes. Every day you remain alive is a testament to the lessons your mother taught you, the skills you've developed, and the instincts that have guided you through crisis after crisis. The wetland may be unforgiving, but it has also been your teacher, your home, and the stage for your transformation from helpless offspring to accomplished survivor. The third year brings a confidence you never expected to feel. Your territory is well established now, marked by scent trails that other deer respect and boundaries that are rarely challenged directly. Your tusks have reached their full intimidating curve, sharp enough to strip bark efficiently and formidable enough to make potential rivals think twice about confrontation. You've mastered the delicate art of wetland politics, knowing when to assert dominance and when strategic retreat serves you better. But success in this environment is always temporary. The ecosystem never stops testing those who call it home, and complacency is just another word for future prey. You've watched other deer grow comfortable with their achievements, only to vanish when they stopped paying attention to the subtle shifts that signal changing conditions. The wetland rewards vigilance and punishes assumptions. Your feeding efficiency has reached levels your younger self couldn't have imagined. You can process tough vegetation with mechanical precision, extract maximum nutrition from marginal plants, and identify the ripest aquatic growth by scent alone. Your diving technique has become so refined that you can remain submerged for extended periods, harvesting underwater plants that other herbivores can't access. These skills aren't just survival tools. They're your competitive advantage in an environment where resources are always contested. The social landscape around you has evolved considerably. Younger deer defer to your presence automatically now, recognizing your status through posture and scent markers. You've become part of the established hierarchy, no longer fighting for recognition, but working to maintain the position you've earned. Other mature males acknowledge you as an equal, leading to more complex territorial negotiations based on mutual respect rather than raw aggression. A new generation of water deer is emerging from the protective care of their mothers, and their inexperience is both amusing and concerning. You watch them make the same mistakes you once made, feeding too long in exposed areas, failing to recognize predator signs, misreading social cues from other deer. Some will learn quickly enough to survive their first year alone, others won't. The wetlands selection pressure is constant and merciless. One young male in particular draws your attention. He's bold to the point of recklessness, challenging territorial boundaries he can't possibly defend, approaching feeding areas where more experienced deer would proceed with caution. His confidence reminds you of your own early encounters with the harsh realities of independent survival. You find yourself tolerating his minor incursions into your territory, perhaps recognizing something of your former self in his desperate bravado. The tolerance doesn't extend to serious challenges, though. When he attempts to claim one of your prime feeding pools, you respond with swift and decisive action. The confrontation is brief. Your experience and superior tusks quickly establish the hierarchy. But instead of driving him off completely, you allow him to feed at the margins of your territory. He needs to learn boundaries, but he also needs to eat. The wetland provides harsh enough lessons without you adding unnecessarily to his struggles. Your relationship with the local crocodile population has evolved into a complex game of mutual awareness and strategic avoidance. You've learned to read the subtle signs of their presence, the particular stillness of water that indicates a submerged body, the absence of small fish and frogs that usually populate productive feeding areas, the way water birds alter their behavior when apex predators are nearby. They've learned to recognize you as prey that's alert, experienced, and unlikely to provide an easy meal. This doesn't mean the threat has diminished. If anything, your success has made you a more attractive target. A healthy adult water deer represents a significant caloric investment worth considerable effort to capture, but the effort required has increased as your survival skills have sharpened. The crocodiles still hunt you, they just do it with more patience and calculation than they'd use on inexperienced prey. Your mental map of safe water entry and exit points has become incredibly detailed. You know which approaches offer the best visibility for spotting lurking predators, which locations provide multiple escape routes if ambushed, which times of day present the lowest risk profiles for aquatic activities. This knowledge base represents years of accumulated experience, each data point purchased through careful observation and occasional close calls. The seasonal flooding patterns no longer surprise you. You anticipate the changes, prepare for them, and often exploit them before less experienced animals recognize the opportunities. When water levels rise, you're already positioned to access newly flooded vegetation. When they fall, you've identified the productive mudflats that will emerge. Your timing has become precise, allowing you to maximize feeding opportunities while minimizing competition. Human activity continues to shape your world in increasingly complex ways. Agricultural expansion has altered water flow patterns throughout the wetland. New drainage channels appear regularly, changing the distribution of food plants and creating novel hazards for unwary wildlife. You've learned to monitor these changes, adjusting your territorial boundaries and movement patterns to account for human modifications to the landscape. The hunting pressure has intensified as your species population has grown. More hunters means more traps, more blinds, more areas where the scent of gun oil and human predation lingers in the vegetation. You've developed an almost supernatural ability to detect these threats, reading wind patterns to identify human scent from considerable distances, recognizing the unnatural geometries of concealed hunting positions, avoiding areas where the bird and insect activity suggests recent human presence. Your survival strategies have become increasingly sophisticated. You've learned to use weather patterns to your advantage, timing risky movements to coincide with conditions that favor your sensory abilities over those of predators. Heavy rain masks your scent and sound while reducing visibility for visual hunters. Wind direction becomes a crucial factor in route planning, ensuring that your scent doesn't advertise your presence to downwind threats. The art of concealment has evolved beyond simple hiding. You've mastered the use of shadows, the strategic positioning that makes your outline difficult to distinguish from background vegetation, the controlled movement that doesn't trigger the motion detection systems of alert predators. Your mottled coat, once just camouflage, has become a tool you consciously employ to blend with different types of cover throughout your territory. Territory defense has become more nuanced as well. Rather than relying primarily on aggressive displays, you've learned to use psychological warfare, strategic scent marking that exaggerates your presence, calculated appearances at territorial boundaries that remind neighbors of your vigilance, subtle demonstrations of your knowledge and control of key resources. These techniques are more energy efficient than constant physical confrontation and often more effective at maintaining territorial integrity. Your fourth year begins with an unusual challenge. A severe drought has reduced water levels throughout the wetland to the lowest you've ever experienced. Many of the pools and channels that normally provide abundant aquatic vegetation have dried completely. Competition for the remaining water sources has intensified dramatically, forcing territorial accommodations that would have been unthinkable during normal conditions. The drought creates temporary alliances among species that are normally competitors. Water deer, wild pigs, and various bird species find themselves sharing the few remaining deep pools. The usual territorial boundaries become meaningless when survival depends on access to increasingly scarce resources. You adapt to this new reality, learning to feed alongside traditional competitors while maintaining awareness of the temporary nature of these arrangements. Food quality changes as plants concentrate their energy into survival rather than growth. The tender shoots and leaves that normally make up the bulk of your diet become scarce, replaced by tougher, less nutritious vegetation that requires more energy to process. Your feeding times extend as you work harder to meet your nutritional needs from increasingly marginal food sources. The concentrated wildlife around remaining water sources creates perfect hunting conditions for predators. Crocodiles no longer need to hunt actively. Prey comes to them. Big cats position themselves along the limited approach routes to water, knowing that desperate animals will eventually be forced to take risks they would normally avoid. The entire predator-prey dynamic shifts as desperation overrides caution. You survive this crisis period through careful resource management and strategic risk-taking. You've identified several small seeps and springs that continue flowing when larger water bodies fail. These hidden resources, known only to the most experienced local animals, provide crucial backup options when primary water sources become too dangerous to approach. Your years of territorial exploration pay dividends as you navigate between these scattered refugia. The drought also brings opportunities for those clever enough to exploit them. Receding water levels expose previously inaccessible root systems and buried seeds. Mudflats that were underwater for years suddenly offer rich feeding opportunities for animals capable of digging efficiently. Your tusks prove invaluable for excavating these buried resources, giving you access to nutrition that less well-equipped competitors can't reach. As water levels continue dropping, the social fabric of the wetland community begins to fray. Territorial boundaries that were respected during times of abundance become meaningless when survival is at stake. Conflicts escalate as animals are forced into increasingly desperate competition for dwindling resources. You witness fights between species that normally coexist peacefully, driven to violence by the relentless pressure of resource scarcity. Your own territorial strategy adapts to these extreme conditions. Rather than defending fixed boundaries, you shift to a mobile approach, following the remaining water and food sources as they shift and disappear. Your territory becomes a network of temporary claims, held only as long as they provide adequate resources, abandoned when better opportunities appear elsewhere. The psychological pressure of constant resource uncertainty begins to tell on all the wetland's inhabitants. Animals that were once confident and territorial become skittish and unpredictable. Feeding behavior changes as the fear of losing access to resources drives increasingly frantic foraging. You maintain your composure better than most, but even your behavior shows signs of stress, increased vigilance, reduced rest periods, more aggressive responses to potential threats. When the rains finally return, the transformation is dramatic and almost immediate. The parched landscape begins to green within days as dormant seeds respond to moisture. Water levels rise rapidly, sometimes dangerously so, as months of accumulated runoff flows through channels that haven't carried water in seasons. The wetland ecosystem explodes back to life with an intensity that matches the severity of the drought that preceded it. Your fifth year begins in this renewed landscape, but you're not the same animal that entered the drought period. The crisis has aged you, not just in time, but in experience and wisdom. You've learned to read environmental conditions with new precision, to anticipate resource fluctuations before they become critical, to maintain reserves and backup plans that can carry you through future emergencies. The social order of the wetland is rebuilding itself as well, but the relationships forged during the crisis period have lasting effects. Animals that shared resources during the drought maintain different relationships afterward. Territorial boundaries are redrawn based on new understanding of resource distribution and accessibility. You find yourself with expanded influence, respected for your ability to navigate crisis conditions successfully. Your mating success during this period reflects your enhanced status. Females recognize the survival skills you've demonstrated, the territorial knowledge you've accumulated, the resources you've secured through skill and persistence. Your genes represent proven adaptability to the wetland's challenges, making you an attractive partner for does seeking to maximize their offspring's survival prospects. The offspring from these matings face a world that's both familiar and transformed. The wetland has recovered from drought, but climate patterns are shifting in ways that make traditional seasonal cycles less predictable. Water levels fluctuate more dramatically, food availability varies more widely, and extreme weather events occur more frequently. Your descendants will need the full range of survival skills you've developed, plus new adaptations for conditions that even your experience hasn't encountered. Human pressure continues to intensify as development encroaches further into wetland areas. New roads fragment habitat connectivity, industrial activities alter water chemistry, and recreational use brings increasing numbers of people into areas that were once reliably wild. You've learned to navigate this changing human landscape, but each modification requires new behavioral adaptations and increases the complexity of survival calculations. Your role in the wetland ecosystem has evolved from simple herbivore to keystone individual whose presence influences the behavior and distribution of many other species. Younger deer learn feeding techniques by observing your methods. Predators adjust their hunting strategies based on your movement patterns. Your territorial decisions affect resource availability for numerous other animals sharing the same habitat. The responsibility of this influence is something you feel instinctively rather than understand intellectually. Your survival strategies don't just affect your own future, they shape the survival prospects of your offspring, your neighbors, and the broader ecological community of which you're a part. Success brings obligation as well as security. As your sixth year approaches, you're entering the prime of your adult life. Your tusks are at their most formidable. Your territorial knowledge is comprehensive. Your survival skills are finely honed. You've weathered multiple crises, adapted to changing conditions, and established yourself as one of the wetland's most successful inhabitants. But you also understand, with the wisdom that comes from experience, that the wetland never stops testing those who call it home. The younger version of yourself might have thought that survival would become easier with experience. The reality is more complex. Success brings new challenges, elevated expectations, and greater responsibilities. You're no longer just surviving, you're thriving. But thriving in an environment as dynamic and unforgiving as the wetlands requires constant vigilance continuous adaptation, and the humility to recognize that even the most experienced survivor is only one mistake away from becoming prey. Your story continues to unfold in the endless cycle of seasons, floods, and droughts that define wetland existence. Each day brings new challenges and new opportunities to demonstrate the skills you've spent years developing. The wetland that once seemed impossibly dangerous to a frightened juvenile now feels like home, but it's a home that demands respect, attention, and the understanding that survival is never guaranteed, only earned through constant effort and unwavering vigilance. You've reached your prime now, but the wetland doesn't care about your achievements. If anything, success has painted a target on your back. Younger males see you as the benchmark they need to surpass. Older ones view you as a threat to their established dominance. And every predator in the area knows you represent a substantial meal worth considerable effort to obtain. Your 6th year brings challenges that would have killed your younger self outright. A new disease spreads through the wetland, something carried by migrating birds that your immune system has never encountered. You watch other deer succumb to fever and weakness, their bodies failing them just when they need strength most. Some recover, others disappear into the reeds and are never seen again. You feel the illness creeping through your system, the fatigue, the loss of appetite, the subtle disorientation that makes familiar territory feel foreign. Recovery takes weeks. During that time, you're vulnerable in ways you haven't experienced since your 1st year alone. Your territorial boundaries blur as you lack the energy to patrol and mark them effectively. Competitors probe your weaknesses, testing areas they wouldn't dare approach when you're healthy. You lose prime feeding spots to more aggressive neighbors, forced to accept marginal areas just to avoid conflicts you can't win in your weakened state. The experience teaches you about the fragility of dominance. Everything you've built can be swept away by circumstances beyond your control: disease, injury, environmental catastrophe. The deer who seemed so confident in their territorial claims can become desperate scavengers within days if conditions shift against them. Your recovery is slow but complete, and the lessons learned during your vulnerability reshape your entire approach to territory management. You become more strategic, less confrontational. Instead of meeting every challenge with aggressive displays, you pick your battles more carefully. Some territorial incursions you ignore entirely, recognizing that the energy cost of defending marginal areas exceeds their value. Others you counter with surgical precision, making it clear that certain boundaries remain absolute while allowing flexibility elsewhere. Your feeding patterns become more sophisticated as well. You develop backup food sources that other deer don't know about or can't access effectively. Hidden groves of nutrient-rich plants, difficult-to-reach pools of aquatic vegetation, seasonal resources that most animals overlook. This diversification strategy provides security against future disruptions, whether from illness, injury, or environmental changes. The social dynamics around you continue evolving. A new generation of females has reached breeding age, and they evaluate potential mates with different criteria than their predecessors. They've grown up during periods of environmental stress and human encroachment, making them more attracted to males who demonstrate adaptability and resource security rather than just physical dominance. Your courtship approaches have matured accordingly. Instead of relying on aggressive displays and territorial posturing, you showcase problem-solving abilities and environmental knowledge. You lead potential mates to the most secure feeding areas, demonstrate efficient processing of difficult vegetation, show familiarity with safe routes through increasingly dangerous terrain. It's a more subtle form of competition, but ultimately more effective at attracting high-quality partners. The offspring from these relationships inherit not just your genes, but your accumulated knowledge. They learn feeding techniques that aren't instinctive, territorial strategies that reflect years of experience, predator avoidance behaviors that go far beyond basic survival instincts. This cultural transmission gives your lineage advantages that purely genetic inheritance couldn't provide. But raising successful offspring in the modern wetland requires constant vigilance. Human activity has intensified to levels that fundamentally alter the ecosystem's functioning. New types of pollution affect plant chemistry, making some traditional food sources less nutritious or even toxic. Noise pollution from machinery and traffic disrupts communication between deer, making it harder to coordinate territorial boundaries and warn of approaching threats. Chemical runoff from agriculture creates algae blooms that choke waterways, reducing oxygen levels and killing fish populations that support the broader ecosystem. When these crashes occur, the entire food web shifts, forcing every species to adapt or face local extinction. You've learned to read the early warning signs: changes in water color, unusual plant growth patterns, altered behavior in fish and bird populations. Your 7th year begins with a crisis that tests every survival skill you've developed. Illegal hunting pressure has intensified dramatically as demand for water deer products increases in distant markets. The hunters are no longer opportunistic locals taking occasional animals for food. They're organized professionals using sophisticated equipment and techniques specifically designed to target your species. The trap density becomes overwhelming. Every traditional travel route is monitored. Every productive feeding area is watched. Every water source is potentially compromised. The hunters have studied your species' behavior patterns and use that knowledge to predict your movements with disturbing accuracy. They understand your territorial needs, your feeding preferences, your responses to different types of pressure. You're forced to abandon most of your established territory, retreating to marginal areas that offer lower food quality but better concealment from human predators. Your movement patterns become erratic, unpredictable, even to yourself. You feed at unusual times, use routes you've never traveled before, avoid areas that common sense says should be safe. Paranoia becomes a survival tool rather than a psychological weakness. The hunting pressure affects the entire deer population, not just you. Social structures break down as animals abandon traditional territories and flee to whatever refugia they can find. Competition for remaining safe areas intensifies beyond anything you've experienced. Fights break out over resources that would have been shared peacefully in normal times. Some deer attempt to adapt by becoming completely nocturnal, but this strategy brings its own problems. Night predators are perfectly adapted for darkness hunting, and your species' advantages in daylight vision become liabilities in low-light conditions. Others try to shift their territories to areas with minimal human access, but these locations often lack the resources needed to support healthy populations. Your survival depends on finding creative solutions that other deer haven't considered. You begin using human infrastructure to your advantage, following drainage ditches that provide concealed travel routes, timing movements to coincide with noisy human activities that mask your sounds, using the edges of cultivated fields where your scent blends with agricultural odors. The strategy works, but it requires constant adaptation as hunters learn to anticipate these behaviors too. It becomes an escalating game of innovation and counter-innovation with your life as the stakes. You develop new evasion techniques, just as they develop new capture methods. Your survival depends on staying one step ahead in this deadly competition. During this crisis period, you encounter something that changes your understanding of human threats. While avoiding a heavily trapped area, you stumble across a different kind of human activity, researchers conducting wildlife surveys. Their behavior is completely different from hunters. They move carefully to avoid disturbing animals, use equipment designed to observe rather than capture, and leave areas unchanged after their visits. The discovery teaches you that not all human presence represents danger. Some humans actively work to protect rather than exploit wildlife. This knowledge allows you to refine your threat assessment, recognizing the difference between protective and predatory human activities. It's a crucial distinction that improves your survival prospects without requiring you to avoid all human-modified areas. Your 8th year brings a different kind of challenge as climate change effects become undeniable. Seasonal patterns that have remained consistent throughout your life begin shifting in unpredictable ways. Wet seasons arrive earlier or later than expected, bringing too much or too little water for optimal plant growth. Dry seasons extend beyond normal limits, creating conditions that stress even the most adaptable species. Temperature fluctuations affect plant chemistry, making some traditional food sources less nutritious while improving others. You're forced to constantly reassess your dietary choices, testing vegetation that was previously marginal to see if changing conditions have made it more viable. Some experiments succeed, expanding your food options. Others result in digestive problems that leave you weakened and vulnerable. The changing climate also affects predator behavior. Some species extend their active periods as temperature ranges shift. Others alter their hunting strategies to account for changes in prey distribution and behavior. You must adapt your own predator avoidance techniques to account for these shifting threat patterns, learning new behavioral cues, and updating your understanding of when and where different dangers are most likely to occur. Water chemistry changes create new health challenges. Higher temperatures and altered runoff patterns affect the bacterial and parasitic loads in wetland waters. You develop new illnesses that your immune system struggles to handle, requiring longer recovery periods and more careful selection of water sources. The crystal clear pools that once seemed safest may now harbor invisible threats. Your territorial strategies must account for increasing environmental unpredictability. Fixed boundaries become liabilities when resource distribution shifts rapidly in response to changing conditions. You adopt a more fluid approach, maintaining core areas while allowing peripheral territories to expand and contract based on current resource availability and threat levels. The stress of constant adaptation begins affecting your behavior in subtle ways. Your tolerance for minor territorial incursions decreases as you become more protective of proven resources. Your willingness to explore new areas diminishes as familiar locations become increasingly unreliable. You find yourself making more conservative choices, trading potential opportunities for proven security. But conservatism has its own risks in a rapidly changing environment. Animals that can't adapt quickly enough to shifting conditions find themselves outcompeted by more flexible neighbors. You watch established deer lose territories they've held for years, not to stronger competitors, but to individuals who better understand how to exploit new resource opportunities created by environmental changes. Your 9th year forces you to confront the reality that you're no longer the dominant force you once were. Younger deer, born into these chaotic conditions, navigate the modern wetland with skills you're still learning to develop. They've never known stable seasonal patterns, consistent food sources, or predictable predator behavior. Their entire survival strategy is built around flexibility and rapid adaptation. This generational shift doesn't mean you're obsolete. Your accumulated knowledge of long-term patterns and rare events remains valuable, but it does mean you can no longer rely solely on experience gained during more stable periods. You must continue learning, adapting, evolving your strategies to remain competitive in an ecosystem that rewards innovation over tradition. Your physical condition remains strong despite the accumulated stress of years in this demanding environment. Your tusks are perfectly maintained, your muscles are lean and powerful, your senses are sharp, but you're beginning to understand that physical fitness alone isn't enough to guarantee continued success. Mental flexibility, adaptability, and the willingness to abandon proven strategies when conditions change have become equally important. The relationships you've built over the years provide some stability in this chaos. Other experienced deer recognize your value as an ally even as they compete with you for resources. Younger animals still seek your guidance when facing unfamiliar challenges. Your reputation for successfully navigating crises makes you a valuable partner in the temporary alliances that form during particularly difficult periods. Your reproductive success during this period reflects both your proven survival abilities and the challenges facing the next generation. Females choose mates not just for current dominance, but for demonstrated adaptability to changing conditions. Your offspring inherit genetic predispositions toward flexibility and problem solving that will serve them well in the uncertain future they'll face. But raising young in these conditions requires different strategies than those your mother used. Traditional hiding spots may no longer be safe due to changing predator patterns. Familiar food sources may be contaminated or depleted. Even basic behaviors like timing of births and weaning must be adjusted to account for shifted seasonal patterns and resource availability. The wetland ecosystem itself is transforming in ways that go far beyond simple climate change. Invasive species introduced by human activity are altering plant communities, creating new competitive pressures and eliminating traditional resources. Some invasives provide superior nutrition, while others are inedible or even toxic. Learning to distinguish between beneficial and harmful newcomers becomes crucial for survival. Water flow patterns have been permanently altered by upstream development and changing precipitation patterns. Areas that were reliably wet for generations now dry up annually, while others flood more frequently and severely than historical norms. Your mental map of safe areas and reliable resources requires constant updating as the physical landscape continues evolving. The human footprint expands relentlessly, bringing new types of disturbance and opportunity. Some developments create novel habitats that benefit water deer, constructed wetlands, agricultural drainage systems, even urban parks with suitable vegetation. Others eliminate critical resources or create barriers that fragment populations and restrict movement between territories. Your 10th year arrives with a sobering realization: you've outlived most of your generation. The deer you grew up with, competed against, and learned from have succumbed to predation, disease, accidents, or the simple accumulation of environmental stresses. You've become one of the elders, a repository of knowledge about conditions and events that younger animals have never experienced. This role brings both respect and isolation. Younger deer seek your advice, but often struggle to understand references to environmental conditions that no longer exist. Your stories of abundant food, predictable seasons, and stable territories sound like myths to animals who've known only scarcity and uncertainty. You find yourself bridging between the wetland as it was and as it's becoming. Your survival strategies have evolved to emphasize efficiency and risk management over territorial expansion or social dominance. You maintain smaller territories, but know them intimately, extracting maximum value from limited resources through superior technique and timing. Your movements are more calculated, your energy expenditure more carefully managed, your choices more focused on long-term sustainability rather than short-term gains. The accumulated wisdom of a decade in the wetlands has taught you to read environmental signals that most animals miss entirely. You can predict weather changes days in advance based on subtle shifts in plant behavior and animal activity patterns. You recognize the early signs of ecological disruptions that won't become obvious to others until they're well advanced. This predictive ability allows you to prepare for challenges while other animals are still unaware they're coming. Your relationship with the human world has become more nuanced as well. You've learned to distinguish between different types of human activity based on subtle cues, vehicle sounds, equipment configurations, movement patterns, timing of activities. This knowledge allows you to exploit human-modified environments while avoiding human-created dangers, using civilization's infrastructure to your advantage while remaining invisible to its inhabitants. The next phase of your life in the wetlands promises new challenges as environmental changes accelerate and human pressure continues intensifying. But you've proven your ability to adapt, learn, and thrive despite seemingly impossible odds. Whatever comes next, you'll face it with the accumulated wisdom of 10 years spent mastering one of the world's most demanding environments. Your 10th year also marks a shift in how you perceive time itself. Days no longer blur together in the simple cycle of feeding and hiding that defined your youth. You've developed an awareness of seasons within seasons, subtle rhythms that most animals never notice. The way morning mist behaves differently before weather changes, how insect activity shifts days before major storms arrive, the particular quality of light that signals the start of breeding season weeks before hormonal changes become obvious. This temporal awareness becomes a survival tool as environmental unpredictability increases. While other deer react to changes after they've already occurred, you're positioning yourself advantageously before shifts become apparent. When you sense an early freeze approaching, you're already moving toward protected feeding areas. When you detect the subtle signs of impending drought, you're establishing access to backup water sources while they're still abundant. Your body has adapted to a decade of constant vigilance and environmental stress. Your muscles have developed the particular type of endurance that comes from years of calculated movement, not the explosive power of a sprinter, but the sustained efficiency of an animal that must cover large territories while remaining perpetually alert. Your digestive system has become remarkably efficient, extracting maximum nutrition from whatever vegetation is available, processing marginal food sources that would leave younger animals malnourished. The scars accumulated over the years tell the story of your survival. Each mark represents a lesson learned, a danger survived, a challenge overcome. The gash on your shoulder from that territorial fight in your 2nd year has healed into a reminder of the importance of choosing battles wisely. The puncture wounds from a close encounter with a wild boar serve as permanent warnings about the dangers of overconfidence. Your body has become a map of hard-won wisdom. Your tusks have reached their maximum development, curved to perfect efficiency for your particular feeding style and territorial needs. They're weapons when necessary, tools constantly, and status symbols that communicate your experience to other deer from considerable distances. The way you carry them, the confidence with which you use them, the casual efficiency of your movements, all signal to observers that they're dealing with an animal who has mastered his environment. Territory management has evolved into an art form that balances multiple competing demands with mathematical precision. You maintain core areas that provide essential resources while holding buffer zones that can be abandoned if pressure becomes too intense. Your boundaries flex and shift based on seasonal availability, human activity patterns, predator movements, and the territorial ambitions of neighbors. It's a complex dance that requires constant attention and frequent adjustment. The younger generation of deer often seeks your guidance, recognizing something in your bearing that marks you as different from the desperate survivors scrambling for resources around them. They don't approach directly. That would violate the subtle protocols of water deer's social interaction, but they position themselves where they can observe your feeding techniques, your movement patterns, your responses to various threats. You've become an unwitting teacher, demonstrating survival strategies through daily example. Some of these observers show promise. A young male has been shadowing your movements for weeks, maintaining respectful distance while clearly studying your methods. He's learned to read your body language, understanding when you're relaxed enough to tolerate his presence and when proximity would trigger defensive responses. His patience and attention to detail suggest he might survive long enough to apply the lessons he's absorbing. Others lack the discipline necessary for long-term survival. They want shortcuts to your success without understanding the years of careful observation and gradual skill development that created your advantages. When they attempt to copy your techniques without grasping the underlying principles, the results are often disastrous. You watch them make fatal mistakes while trying to replicate behaviors they've only partially understood. The wetlands predator community has adapted to your success as well. Individual crocodiles have learned your specific movement patterns, positioning themselves along routes you've used historically. They understand that patience pays higher dividends when hunting experienced prey. Rushing attacks rarely succeed against animals with your level of awareness and reflexes. Instead, they wait for moments of distraction or vulnerability, knowing that even the most careful deer occasionally makes mistakes. Big cats have developed similar strategies, studying your territorial boundaries and identifying locations where terrain features might provide ambush opportunities. They've learned that direct stalking approaches rarely work against animals with your sensory capabilities, so they focus on creating situations where your own behavior patterns work against you. It's a sophisticated form of predation that treats hunting as a long-term intellectual exercise rather than a simple test of speed and strength. Your counter-adaptations have become equally sophisticated. You've learned to vary your routines unpredictably, using different routes and timing to prevent predators from establishing reliable ambush positions. Your movement patterns incorporate deliberate inefficiencies, detours that serve no obvious purpose except to confuse potential hunters who might be tracking your habits. Sometimes, you revisit areas where you've detected predator sign, not to feed, but to assess whether threats have moved on or intensified. The human hunting pressure that peaked during your 7th year has evolved into a more subtle but persistent threat. Professional hunters have learned that obvious trapping and tracking methods don't work against experienced animals, so they've shifted to passive strategies that exploit your basic needs rather than your behavioral patterns. Water sources are monitored rather than trapped. Feeding areas are watched from concealed positions rather than actively hunted. The pressure is less intense but more pervasive. Your responses have evolved accordingly. You've developed techniques for detecting human observation equipment, recognizing the unnatural geometries and material properties that distinguish cameras and sensors from natural environmental features. Your water consumption has become more strategic, using multiple sources and varying your approach patterns to prevent predictable exposure to monitoring. You've learned to exploit weather conditions that interfere with human technology: heavy rain, fog, extreme temperatures that affect equipment performance. The changing climate continues reshaping your world in ways that require constant adaptation. Plant communities are shifting as some species prove more resilient to new temperature and precipitation patterns, while others decline or disappear entirely. Your dietary flexibility, developed over years of environmental uncertainty, allows you to exploit these changes, while other herbivores struggle with the loss of traditional food sources. Some climate-driven changes work to your advantage. Warmer temperatures have extended growing seasons for certain aquatic plants, providing additional nutrition during periods that were historically lean. Altered precipitation patterns have created new wetland areas in previously dry locations, expanding the total habitat available to your species. But these benefits are offset by losses elsewhere: traditional refugia that have dried up, food sources that have become less nutritious due to changed growing conditions, water sources that have become unreliable or contaminated. Your reproductive strategy has adapted to these uncertain conditions. Rather than timing breeding to coincide with historically optimal resource availability, you've learned to assess current conditions and adjust accordingly. Some years, you breed early to take advantage of unusual abundance. Other years, you delay or skip breeding entirely when environmental stress suggests that offspring survival prospects are poor. This flexibility allows you to maximize reproductive success over the long term rather than following rigid biological schedules. The offspring you do produce inherit both your genetic adaptability and your accumulated environmental knowledge. They learn feeding techniques that are instinctive, predator avoidance strategies that go beyond basic survival responses, territorial management approaches that reflect years of experience with changing conditions. This cultural transmission gives your lineage significant advantages in an environment where traditional behaviors often prove inadequate for current challenges. But cultural transmission also creates responsibilities. The knowledge you've accumulated represents not just personal survival strategies, but collective wisdom that could benefit the broader water deer population. Your survival techniques, if widely adopted, could improve species-wide resilience to environmental changes. Yet the competitive nature of territorial herbivore social structures limits opportunities for knowledge sharing beyond your immediate offspring and occasional observers. Your 11th year begins with recognition that you've entered the final phase of your life. Your body remains strong and your mind sharp, but the accumulated stress of a decade in one of Earth's most demanding environments is beginning to show in subtle ways. Recovery from minor injuries takes longer. Your tolerance for extreme weather conditions has decreased slightly. Your energy reserves, while still adequate, require more careful management than in previous years. These changes don't represent weakness or failure. They're the natural result of a life lived at the edge of survival possibility. Every day you remain alive is a victory against odds that eliminate most of your species before they reach maturity. Your longevity itself is a testament to the effectiveness of the survival strategies you've developed and refined over the years. The wetland around you continues its relentless transformation. New species appear as climate refugees from other ecosystems, arrive seeking suitable habitat. Familiar species disappear as conditions shift beyond their tolerance ranges. The community of organisms you've coexisted with for years is gradually being replaced by a different assemblage, adapted to the emerging environmental conditions. Your role in this changing ecosystem has evolved beyond simple herbivory. Your feeding activities help maintain plant community diversity by preventing any single species from dominating productive areas. Your territorial behavior influences the distribution of other deer, affecting grazing pressure throughout the wetland. Your survival success provides proof of concept for adaptation strategies that other animals observe and potentially emulate. The human footprint continues expanding, but your relationship with human-modified environments has become increasingly sophisticated. You've learned to exploit the edge effects where natural and artificial habitats meet, finding resources and opportunities that exist only in these transitional zones. Urban drainage systems provide reliable water sources. Agricultural areas offer seasonal abundance of crops that supplement natural vegetation. Even recreational facilities sometimes create habitat conditions that benefit your species. This human-wildlife interface requires constant vigilance and adaptation. Human activities are unpredictable compared to natural environmental patterns, creating both sudden opportunities and unexpected dangers. Construction projects can eliminate critical resources overnight or create new ones just as quickly. Traffic patterns affect safe movement routes. Seasonal human activities like hunting, fishing, and recreation create fluctuating pressure that requires behavioral adjustments. Your survival strategies have evolved to incorporate these human factors as seamlessly as natural environmental variables. You read the rhythms of human activity as carefully as you read weather patterns or predator behavior. Morning and evening commuter traffic creates predictable noise that can mask your movements. Weekend recreational activities follow patterns that allow you to predict when certain areas will be disturbed. Agricultural schedules determine when fields will offer foraging opportunities versus when they'll be actively managed and dangerous to approach. The knowledge you've accumulated about human-wildlife coexistence represents a new form of evolutionary adaptation. Traditional water deer behaviors evolved over thousands of years in response to natural selection pressures. Your behavioral innovations have developed within a single lifetime in response to rapid environmental changes that evolution hasn't had time to address through genetic mechanisms. You've become a bridge between your species' evolutionary past and its uncertain future. Your 12th year arrives with the understanding that you've become something unique, not just a successful survivor, but a pioneer in your species' adaptation to the modern world. The techniques you've developed, the knowledge you've accumulated, the strategies you've refined represent a new evolutionary direction for water deer. Whether your innovations will spread to the broader population depends on factors beyond your control, but your existence proves that adaptation is possible even under seemingly impossible conditions. The wetland that once seemed impossibly vast and dangerous now feels like home in the deepest sense. Every pool, every feeding area, every safe route through the territory carries memories and associations built up over more than a decade of intimate familiarity. You know the seasonal rhythms of individual plants, the behavioral patterns of specific predators, the subtle variations in water chemistry that affect different areas throughout the year. This deep knowledge creates a form of security that younger animals can't understand. While they see an environment full of threats and uncertainties, you see a complex but comprehensible system whose patterns and possibilities you've spent years learning to read. Your survival no longer depends on luck or simple reflexes. It's based on understanding developed through patient observation and careful experimentation over thousands of days spent in direct engagement with environmental challenges. But this familiarity also creates vulnerability. Your success has made you valuable to predators willing to invest considerable time and effort in hunting you. Your predictability, despite your efforts to vary routines, provides opportunities for patient hunters who understand your basic needs and territorial requirements. Your reputation as a successful survivor makes you a high priority target for both natural predators and human hunters seeking trophy animals. The balance between security through knowledge and vulnerability through predictability defines the central challenge of your current existence. You must continue exploiting the advantages that familiarity provides while preventing that familiarity from becoming a liability. It's a delicate calculation that requires constant adjustment as conditions change and new threats emerge. Your 13th year dawns with the recognition that you've outlived not just your generation, but most environmental conditions that shaped your early survival strategies. The wetland you inhabit now bears only superficial resemblance to the one where you learned to survive. Climate patterns, species composition, human activity levels, predator populations, everything has shifted in ways that make historical experience only partially relevant to current challenges. Yet somehow you've managed not just to survive these changes, but to thrive within them. Your success represents more than individual achievement. It demonstrates your species' potential for adaptation under extreme pressure. You've become living proof that water deer can survive in the modern world, but only through constant learning, behavioral flexibility, and the willingness to abandon traditional approaches when conditions demand innovation. The future stretches ahead with uncertainty, but not despair. You've faced seemingly impossible challenges before and found ways to overcome them through patience, observation, and careful adaptation. Whatever changes lie ahead, you'll meet them with the accumulated wisdom of 13 years spent mastering one of Earth's most demanding environments. Your story continues, written daily in the choices you make and the challenges you overcome in your endless quest to survive and thrive in the ever-changing wetlands that have become your domain. The arrival of your 14th year brings a harsh reality you've been avoiding. Your body, which has carried you through countless crises with reliable strength, is beginning to show the accumulated wear of a lifetime spent at the edge of survival. Your joints ache on cold mornings in ways they never did before. Your eyesight, once sharp enough to spot predators at impossible distances, requires more effort to focus on distant threats. The changes are subtle but undeniable. Your movement patterns shift to accommodate these physical limitations. Where you once bounded effortlessly through thick vegetation, you now pick more careful routes that minimize strain on aging joints. Your territorial patrols become more strategic, focusing on critical areas rather than comprehensive coverage. You've learned to conserve energy for moments when peak performance truly matters, accepting that you can no longer maintain the constant intensity that defined your younger years. But experience compensates for declining physical capabilities in ways that surprise even you. Your ability to read environmental conditions has reached levels that border on supernatural. You can predict weather changes with accuracy that puts modern forecasting to shame, positioning yourself advantageously days before storms arrive or droughts intensify. Your understanding of predator behavior allows you to avoid dangerous encounters that younger deer would stumble into blindly. The wetland's younger inhabitants view you with a mixture of respect and curiosity. They see an animal who has achieved something they're not sure is possible, genuine mastery of an environment that seems designed to kill anything foolish enough to call it home. Some seek to learn from your example, though few have the patience required to understand the subtle principles underlying your success. Others maintain cautious distance, recognizing that proximity to a high-value target might increase their own risk of predation. Your feeding efficiency has reached peak refinement. You've identified microhabitats within your territory that produce superior nutrition at specific times of day and season. A particular bend in a small stream that catches morning sunlight just right, creating perfect conditions for certain aquatic plants during a 2-week window each spring. A grove of trees whose roots tap into a hidden water source, keeping their leaves tender when everything else becomes tough and fibrous during dry periods. These discoveries represent the accumulated dividend of years spent in careful observation. The territorial boundaries you maintain have evolved into something resembling a work of art. Every border reflects precise calculation of resource value versus defensive costs. You hold absolutely critical areas with unwavering determination while allowing flexibility in zones that provide marginal benefits. Your scent marking has become incredibly efficient, conveying maximum information with minimum energy expenditure. Other deer can read your territorial claims like detailed maps, understanding not just where your boundaries lie, but how seriously you'll defend different areas. Water access remains your most carefully guarded resource. You've developed relationships with multiple water sources that provide redundancy against seasonal fluctuations, human interference, and competitive pressure. Some are obvious pools that you share with other animals under carefully negotiated protocols. Others are hidden seeps and springs known only to you, discovered through years of systematic exploration and jealously protected through strategic misdirection of potential competitors. Your diving technique has evolved beyond simple food acquisition into an art form that maximizes efficiency while minimizing vulnerability. You can assess underwater vegetation quality by touch alone, selecting only the most nutritious portions while leaving the rest to regenerate. Your breath-holding capacity, developed through necessity over the years, allows you to remain submerged long enough to thoroughly harvest productive areas before surfacing to check for threats. The relationship between you and the wetlands predator community has settled into a complex equilibrium based on mutual respect and understanding. The crocodiles know you're difficult prey that requires exceptional patience and perfect execution to catch. You know they're persistent hunters whose presence can never be dismissed or ignored. This knowledge creates a tense but stable coexistence where both sides understand the rules of engagement. Individual predators have developed hunting strategies specifically tailored to your behavioral patterns. One particular crocodile has spent years studying your water access routines, positioning itself at locations where terrain features might provide the split-second advantage needed to overcome your reflexes and experience. You've countered by varying your approaches unpredictably and developing alternative access points that bypass this hunter's preferred ambush sites. The big cats present different challenges that require different solutions. Their hunting strategies rely more on stealth and surprise than the patient positioning favored by aquatic predators. You've learned to read the subtle environmental cues that indicate feline presence, the unusual silence of small birds, the absence of normal insect activity, the particular way vegetation moves when disturbed by a stalking predator. These signals allow you to detect threats before they're close enough to pose immediate danger. Human hunting pressure has evolved into something more sophisticated than the crude trapping and direct pursuit that characterized earlier years. Modern hunters understand that successful predation of experienced animals requires long-term strategies based on detailed behavioral analysis. They study your movements over weeks or months, identifying patterns and preferences that can be exploited through carefully planned interventions. Your counter strategies have evolved accordingly. You've learned to recognize the signs of human surveillance, equipment positioned with unnatural precision, vegetation disturbances that don't match natural patterns, the absence of normal wildlife activity in areas where human observers might be concealed. This awareness allows you to detect monitoring efforts before they've gathered enough information to be truly dangerous. The changing climate continues reshaping your world in ways that require constant adaptation of survival strategies developed over more than a decade of environmental observation. Temperature fluctuations affect plant chemistry in ways that alter nutritional content and digestibility of traditional food sources. Some vegetation that was previously marginal has become highly nutritious under new growing conditions. Other plants that formed the backbone of your diet for years have declined in quality or become scarce. Water chemistry changes present ongoing challenges to your health and feeding strategies. Increased temperatures and altered runoff patterns affect bacterial loads, algae growth, and parasite populations in ways that require careful evaluation of each water source before use. You've developed techniques for assessing water quality that go far beyond simple visual inspection, using subtle cues like insect activity and plant health to evaluate microbial safety. Your reproductive strategy during this period reflects both your proven genetic quality and the realistic limitations imposed by aging. Females still seek you as a mate, recognizing the survival advantages that your offspring would inherit. But you're more selective about breeding opportunities, understanding that each reproductive effort represents a significant energy investment that must be carefully balanced against other survival needs. The offspring you do produce benefit from both your genetic heritage and your accumulated environmental knowledge. They learn feeding techniques that aren't instinctive, territorial strategies that reflect years of trial and error, predator avoidance behaviors that go far beyond basic survival responses. This cultural transmission gives your lineage advantages that purely genetic inheritance couldn't provide, increasing their chances of surviving in an increasingly challenging environment. Your role in the broader wetland ecosystem has evolved beyond simple herbivory into something approaching keystone species status. Your feeding activities help maintain plant community diversity by preventing competitive exclusion. Your territorial behavior influences the distribution of other deer throughout the habitat. Your survival success demonstrates adaptation strategies that other animals observe and potentially emulate. The knowledge you've accumulated about human-wildlife coexistence represents a form of rapid evolutionary adaptation that occurs within individual lifetimes rather than across generations. You've learned to exploit human infrastructure while avoiding human dangers, to read the rhythms of human activity as precisely as natural environmental patterns. These innovations could prove crucial for your species' long-term survival in an increasingly human-dominated world. Your 15th year arrives with the sobering recognition that you're entering uncharted territory. Few water deer in recorded history have survived this long in the wild. Every day you remain alive represents a triumph against statistical odds that eliminated your contemporaries years ago. Your longevity itself becomes a form of ecological research, demonstrating your species' potential lifespan under optimal survival conditions. The wetland around you has become a completely different ecosystem than the one where you learned basic survival skills. Climate change, human development, species migrations, and evolutionary adaptations have transformed every aspect of the environment. Yet somehow, you've not only survived these changes, but maintained your position as a successful territory holder and breeding individual throughout the transition. Your body shows the inevitable signs of advanced age, but your mind remains sharp and your environmental awareness continues improving. You've learned to compensate for physical limitations through superior knowledge and strategic thinking. Where younger deer rely on speed and strength, you depend on patience and precision. Where they react to threats after detection, you position yourself to avoid dangerous situations entirely. The respect you command from other wetland inhabitants reflects recognition of your unique status as an elder who has mastered the art of survival. Younger deer seek opportunities to observe your techniques, understanding instinctively that proximity to your success might improve their own survival prospects. Even predators approach encounters with you differently, recognizing that hunting such experienced prey requires exceptional skill and perfect execution. Your territory has evolved into a masterpiece of efficient resource management. Every boundary reflects years of careful optimization, balancing resource access against defensive requirements. Your scent marking system conveys complex information about your intentions, capabilities, and territorial claims with remarkable precision. Other deer can read these chemical messages, like detailed maps, understanding exactly what you're willing to defend and under what circumstances. The feeding strategies you've developed represent the culmination of 15 years spent learning to extract maximum nutrition from a challenging environment. You know which plants provide the best nutrition at different times of day and season, which locations produce the highest quality vegetation, which processing techniques maximize digestibility while minimizing energy expenditure. Your efficiency has reached levels that younger animals view as almost magical. Water management has become perhaps your greatest expertise. You maintain access to multiple sources that provide security against seasonal fluctuations, competitive pressure, and human interference. Your knowledge of water quality assessment allows you to evaluate microbial safety, chemical contamination, and predator risk with remarkable accuracy. This expertise has become crucial as environmental changes make water security increasingly challenging throughout the wetland. Your relationship with the human world has reached sophisticated levels of understanding that few wild animals achieve. You can distinguish between different types of human activity based on subtle behavioral cues, recognizing which represent opportunities versus threats. You've learned to exploit human infrastructure while remaining invisible to human observation, using civilization's modifications to natural systems for your own survival advantage. The predator community has adapted to your success in ways that reflect grudging professional respect. Individual hunters have spent years developing strategies specifically tailored to your behavioral patterns and defensive capabilities. Those personalized hunting approaches represent significant investments of time and energy, indicating that predators view you as prey worthy of exceptional effort. Your counter-adaptations have reached equally sophisticated levels. You've learned to vary your routines unpredictably while maintaining access to essential resources. Your movement patterns incorporate deliberate inefficiencies designed to confuse potential hunters. Your environmental awareness has developed to the point where you can detect surveillance efforts and predator positioning before they become immediately threatening. The knowledge you've accumulated about environmental change and adaptation strategies represents valuable information for your species' future survival. Your behavioral innovations demonstrate potential responses to challenges that other water deer haven't yet encountered. Whether these techniques will spread through the population depends on factors beyond your control, but your existence proves that adaptation is possible even under extreme pressure. Your 16th year dawns with the understanding that you've achieved something remarkable, not just individual survival, but mastery of one of Earth's most demanding environments during a period of unprecedented change. The wetland that once seemed impossibly dangerous now feels like home in the deepest sense. Every aspect of this complex ecosystem has been explored, understood, and integrated into a comprehensive survival strategy that has carried you through challenges that eliminated nearly all your contemporaries. But the wetland doesn't care about your achievements or your age. If anything, your success has made you a more attractive target for the predators and competitors who recognize valuable prey when they see it. Your survival continues to depend on the same vigilance, adaptability, and careful decision-making that brought you this far. There's no retirement from the demands of wetland existence, no rest for animals who have mastered their environment. The future stretches ahead with uncertainty but not despair. You've faced impossible challenges before and found ways to overcome them through patience, observation, and intelligent adaptation. Your story continues to unfold in the endless cycle of seasons and changes that define wetland existence. Each day brings new opportunities to demonstrate the survival skills you've spent 16 years developing and refining. Your legacy lives not just in your own continued survival, but in the knowledge you've accumulated, the techniques you've developed, and the proof you've provided that your species can adapt to whatever challenges the changing world presents. You've become more than just a successful individual. You've become a bridge between your species' evolutionary past and its uncertain future, demonstrating that survival is possible for those willing to learn, adapt, and persevere against overwhelming odds. The wetland around you continues its eternal transformation, but you've learned to read its moods and anticipate its changes. Whatever lies ahead, you'll face it with the accumulated wisdom of 16 years spent mastering one of nature's most unforgiving classrooms. Your survival continues, written daily in the choices you make and the challenges you overcome in your endless quest to thrive in the ever-changing world that has become your domain. The morning of your 17th year arrives differently than all the others before it. You feel it in your bones, a subtle shift, a warning that your body has been whispering for months, but you've been ignoring. Your joints protest more sharply against the cold. Your breathing requires more conscious effort during even simple movements. The reflexes that have saved your life countless times respond just a fraction slower than they once did, but your mind remains sharp, perhaps sharper than ever. 17 years of accumulated knowledge has created a form of intelligence that transcends instinct. You can predict environmental changes with accuracy that seems supernatural to younger animals. Your understanding of the wetland's rhythms allows you to position yourself advantageously before challenges become apparent to others. Experience has become your greatest weapon in an arsenal that once relied on speed and strength. Your territory has shrunk slightly over the past year, not due to competitive pressure, but through strategic consolidation. You've learned to hold only what you can defend efficiently, focusing on core areas that provide maximum resource value with minimal energy expenditure. Quality over quantity has become your territorial motto, reflecting the practical wisdom that comes from understanding your own limitations. The respect you command from other deer has evolved into something approaching reverence. They see in you something they're not sure they can achieve themselves, proof that survival is possible in a world that seems designed to eliminate the unwary. Young males study your movements with scholarly attention, trying to decode techniques that represent decades of refinement. Females recognize you as genetic royalty, understanding that your offspring carry survival advantages accumulated through years of successful adaptation. Your feeding patterns have reached peak efficiency through sheer necessity. Every calorie must be maximized, every movement calculated to achieve specific nutritional goals. You've identified microenvironments within your territory that produce exceptional food quality during narrow windows of opportunity. A particular depression that collects morning dew, creating perfect growing conditions for tender shoots. A stretch of stream where specific aquatic plants concentrate nutrients during certain seasonal periods. Water access has become your most critical vulnerability and your greatest area of expertise. You maintain knowledge of 17 different water sources within your expanded range, each with specific advantages and risks. Some provide superior water quality, but require dangerous exposure to reach. Others offer safety, but may not be reliable during drought periods. Your daily survival depends on constantly evaluating these trade-offs and making optimal choices based on current conditions. The crocodiles have adapted their hunting strategies to account for your experience and caution. They no longer attempt quick ambush attacks, understanding that success against prey of your caliber requires exceptional patience and perfect execution. Instead, they position themselves for opportunities that might develop over days or weeks, waiting for moments when age or circumstance might create the split-second vulnerability they need. You've countered by developing water access techniques that minimize exposure while maximizing efficiency. Your approach patterns vary unpredictably, using different routes and timing to prevent predators from establishing reliable ambush positions. Sometimes, you approach water sources solely to assess threat levels, drinking elsewhere after confirming safety. The psychological warfare between you and your hunters has reached sophisticated levels that younger animals can barely comprehend. Human pressure has evolved into something more subtle but equally dangerous. Modern hunters understand that direct confrontation rarely succeeds against animals with your experience level. Instead, they focus on creating situations where your own behavioral patterns might work against you. They study your territorial boundaries and resource needs, looking for choke points where geography limits your options and increases their chances of success. Your counter-surveillance techniques have become correspondingly sophisticated. You've learned to recognize human observation equipment by its unnatural geometry and material properties. Your movement patterns incorporate deliberate unpredictability designed to confuse behavioral analysis. Sometimes you visit areas solely to leave misleading scent trails, creating false impressions about your actual territorial priorities and movement intentions. The changing climate continues altering your world in ways that require constant adaptation of strategies developed over nearly 2 decades. Plant communities shift as some species prove more resilient to new conditions while others decline or disappear. Your dietary flexibility, refined through years of environmental uncertainty, allows you to exploit these changes, while other herbivores struggle with the loss of traditional food sources. Some climate-driven modifications work to your advantage. Extended growing seasons for certain vegetation provide additional nutrition during historically lean periods. Altered precipitation patterns have created new wetland areas that expand available habitat. But these benefits are offset by losses elsewhere: traditional refugia that have dried permanently, water sources that have become contaminated or unreliable, food plants that have lost nutritional value under changed growing conditions. Your reproductive strategy during this final phase reflects both your proven genetic quality and realistic limitations imposed by advanced age. Females still seek you as a mate, understanding that your offspring inherit not just genes, but accumulated environmental knowledge that could prove crucial for their survival. But you're extremely selective about breeding opportunities, recognizing that each reproductive effort represents an enormous energy investment that must be carefully weighed against other survival requirements. The offspring you do produce represent perhaps your greatest legacy. They learn techniques that aren't instinctive, territorial strategies that reflect decades of trial and error, predator avoidance behaviors that go far beyond basic survival responses. This cultural transmission gives your lineage advantages that purely genetic inheritance couldn't provide, potentially influencing your species' adaptation to future challenges for generations. Your role in the broader ecosystem has transcended simple herbivory to become something approaching environmental stewardship. Your feeding activities help maintain plant community diversity through selective pressure that prevents competitive exclusion. Your territorial behavior influences the distribution of other deer throughout the habitat. Your survival success demonstrates adaptation strategies that other animals observe and potentially emulate. The knowledge you've accumulated about rapid environmental change represents a form of evolution that occurs within individual lifetimes rather than across generations. You've learned to exploit human infrastructure while avoiding human dangers, to read technological patterns as precisely as natural environmental cycles. These innovations could prove crucial for your species' long-term survival in an increasingly human-dominated world. Winter arrives earlier than expected during your 17th year, bringing temperatures that challenge even your refined survival strategies. Your body responds more slowly to cold stress, requiring additional energy to maintain core temperature. Your movement becomes more deliberate as joints stiffen in ways they never did during your prime years. For the first time in your adult life, you feel genuinely vulnerable to environmental conditions that you once weathered with confidence. You adjust by shifting to more sheltered areas within your territory, locations that provide protection from wind and retain heat more effectively. Your feeding schedule adapts to take advantage of the warmest parts of each day, when plant chemistry is optimal and your body functions most efficiently. Energy conservation becomes paramount as you recognize that waste motion could mean the difference between surviving until spring and joining the countless deer whose stories ended during harsh winters. The predator community senses your increased vulnerability, like sharks detecting blood in water. They begin testing your defenses more aggressively, probing for weaknesses that age might have created. A young crocodile attempts an opportunistic attack during one of your water visits, perhaps thinking that your reflexes have slowed enough to make success possible. The attempt fails, but barely, and you realize with sobering clarity that the margins for error that once seemed comfortable have narrowed dramatically. Your counter strategies evolve to emphasize avoidance over confrontation. Where you once might have defended prime resources through aggressive displays, you now choose strategic withdrawal when the energy costs of defense exceed the value of what you're protecting. It's a calculated retreat that preserves strength for battles that truly matter, while accepting minor losses that won't affect your overall survival prospects. The human hunting pressure intensifies during winter as professional hunters recognize that cold stress makes even experienced animals more predictable and vulnerable. They focus their efforts on water sources and sheltered feeding areas, understanding that winter weather limits your options and increases the likelihood of successful interception. Your survival depends on maintaining access to critical resources while avoiding the concentrated attention that success has brought you. Spring arrives late, testing your endurance to its limits. By the time growing conditions return, you've lost significant body weight and feel the accumulated fatigue of a winter that pushed your aging body closer to its breaking point than ever before. Recovery is slower than in previous years, requiring weeks to regain the condition that you once rebuilt in days. But you do recover, drawing on reserves of resilience that seem to surprise even you. The return of abundant food and warmer temperatures allows your body to begin repairing the damage inflicted by months of survival at the margins of possibility. Your territorial patrols resume, though with less frequency and intensity than in previous years. Your scent marking continues, though the chemical messages now reflect a more defensive posture than the confident claims of earlier periods. Your 18th year begins with the recognition that you've entered truly uncharted territory. No water deer in recorded history has been documented surviving this long in the wild. Every day represents a victory against statistical impossibilities that eliminated your entire generation years ago. Your existence has become a form of scientific research demonstrating your species' maximum potential lifespan under optimal survival conditions. The wetland around you has become completely transformed from the environment where you learned basic survival skills nearly 2 decades ago. Climate change, human development, species migrations, and evolutionary adaptations have created an ecosystem that would be unrecognizable to your younger self. Yet somehow, you've not only survived these changes, but maintained your status as a successful territory holder throughout the entire transformation. Your body shows unmistakable signs of advanced age. Your coat has lost some of its luster, your movements have become more deliberate, your recovery from exertion takes longer than it once did, but your environmental awareness continues improving, compensating for physical limitations through superior knowledge and strategic thinking. You've learned to avoid situations that would test your declining physical capabilities while positioning yourself to exploit opportunities that require experience rather than strength. The other inhabitants of the wetland view you with a mixture of awe and curiosity. You represent something they're not certain is achievable, mastery of an environment that seems designed to kill anything foolish enough to attempt long-term residence. Your survival has become legendary among the local deer population, inspiring both respect and careful study of your techniques. Your feeding efficiency has reached levels that seem almost supernatural to observers. You can assess vegetation quality by scent alone, selecting only the most nutritious portions while leaving inferior material for competitors. Your processing techniques extract maximum nutrition while minimizing energy expenditure. Your timing takes advantage of daily and seasonal variations in plant chemistry that other animals don't even recognize exist. The territorial boundaries you maintain represent a masterpiece of resource optimization refined over nearly 2 decades of continuous adjustment. Every border reflects careful calculation of defensive costs versus resource benefits. Your scent marking system conveys complex information with remarkable efficiency, allowing other deer to understand your intentions and capabilities without requiring energy-expensive confrontations. Water management has become perhaps your greatest area of expertise. You maintain detailed knowledge of more than 20 different water sources throughout your expanded range, each with specific advantages and seasonal availability patterns. Your assessment techniques can evaluate quality, safety, and predator risk with accuracy that allows you to make optimal choices under any conditions. Your relationship with the predator community has evolved into something resembling a complex professional relationship. They recognize you as prey worthy of their highest skills and greatest patience. You understand them as persistent adversaries whose capabilities must never be underestimated. This mutual respect creates a tense but stable dynamic where both sides understand the rules of engagement. The human world has become integrated into your survival calculations as seamlessly as any natural environmental factor. You read the rhythms of human activity with the same precision you apply to weather patterns and seasonal changes. Your ability to exploit human infrastructure while remaining invisible to human observation has reached levels that few wild animals achieve. As your 18th year progresses, you begin to understand that you're living on borrowed time. Each day represents a gift that statistical probability suggests you shouldn't receive. Your survival has transcended normal biological expectations to become something approaching a miracle of adaptation and persistence. Yet the wetland continues demanding the same vigilance and careful decision-making that brought you this far. The winter of your 18th year arrives with unprecedented severity. Temperatures drop lower and remain cold longer than any weather pattern in your experience. Ice forms on water sources that have never frozen during your lifetime. Snow covers the ground for weeks, making foraging nearly impossible and forcing desperate competition for any available nutrition. Your body struggles with the extreme conditions in ways that make your advanced age undeniable. Your joints seize up during the coldest periods, making movement painful and slow. Your appetite decreases as your digestive system works less efficiently in the cold. For the first time in your adult life, you feel genuinely uncertain about your ability to survive until spring. You adapt by retreating to the most sheltered locations within your territory, areas that provide maximum protection from wind and retain what little heat is available. Your activity becomes minimal, conserving energy for essential functions while waiting for conditions to improve. You enter a state of semi-hibernation that you've never needed to employ before, trusting that your accumulated body fat and refined survival instincts will carry you through the crisis. The extreme weather eliminates many of your contemporaries and competitors. Younger animals that seemed strong and healthy disappear during the worst cold snaps. Territory that has been contested for years suddenly becomes available as occupants succumb to conditions they can't survive. The wetlands population undergoes dramatic restructuring as only the most resilient individuals endure the unprecedented environmental stress. You survive the winter, but barely. When spring finally arrives, you've lost more weight than ever before and feel a fatigue that seems to penetrate your bones. Recovery is slow and incomplete, leaving you permanently weakened in ways that affect every aspect of your daily survival routine. Your territorial patrols become shorter and less frequent. Your feeding requires more time and effort to meet basic nutritional needs, but you do recover enough to continue functioning as a territory holder and successful survivor. Your experience and knowledge compensate for declining physical capabilities, allowing you to maintain access to essential resources through superior strategy rather than raw capability. You've learned to work smarter rather than harder, applying 18 years of accumulated wisdom to offset the limitations imposed by advanced age. Your 19th year begins with the sobering recognition that you're living entirely beyond normal biological expectations. Your survival has become statistically impossible, yet you continue existing through sheer will and the accumulated advantages of nearly 2 decades spent mastering an impossibly demanding environment. Each day represents a victory against odds that no reasonable calculation would favor. The respect you command from other wetland inhabitants has evolved beyond admiration into something approaching veneration. You've become a living legend, proof that survival is possible for those willing to learn, adapt, and persevere against overwhelming challenges. Young deer study your every movement with scholarly intensity, trying to decode secrets that might improve their own survival prospects. Your territory has contracted to a core area that provides maximum resource density with minimal energy expenditure for defense. You've learned to hold only what you can protect efficiently, focusing on locations that offer the best combination of food, water, and security. Quality over quantity has become your guiding principle, reflecting hard-won understanding of your own limitations and capabilities. The feeding strategies you employ have reached peak refinement through decades of continuous optimization. You know which plants provide superior nutrition at specific times and locations. Your processing techniques extract maximum caloric value while minimizing energy expenditure. Your timing takes advantage of subtle environmental conditions that affect plant chemistry in ways that younger animals never recognize. Water access remains your most critical vulnerability and greatest area of expertise. You maintain knowledge of dozens of water sources throughout your range, each with specific characteristics that make them suitable under different conditions. Your assessment abilities allow you to evaluate quality, safety, and accessibility with remarkable accuracy, ensuring optimal choices, regardless of seasonal fluctuations or competitive pressure. Your relationship with predators has settled into a complex equilibrium based on mutual recognition of capabilities and limitations. They understand you as experienced prey that requires exceptional skill and patience to hunt successfully. You recognize them as persistent adversaries whose presence can never be dismissed or ignored. This professional respect creates a stable but tense coexistence where both sides understand the rules. The human world has become seamlessly integrated into your survival calculations. You read human activity patterns with the same precision you apply to natural environmental factors. Your ability to exploit human-modified environments while avoiding human dangers has reached sophisticated levels that few wild animals achieve. You've learned to use civilization's infrastructure for your own survival advantage while remaining essentially invisible to human observation. As autumn approaches during your 19th year, you feel changes in your body that signal the approaching end of your remarkable journey. Your movements become more labored, your recovery from exertion takes longer, your appetite decreases as your digestive system becomes less efficient. The accumulated stress of nearly 2 decades spent at the edge of survival possibility is finally taking its inevitable toll. You adjust your strategies once more, focusing on energy conservation and risk avoidance rather than territorial expansion or competitive displays. Your daily routines become simplified, eliminating any activity that doesn't directly contribute to immediate survival needs. You retreat to the most secure areas of your territory, locations that offer maximum protection with minimal energy requirements for access. The other inhabitants of the wetland seem to sense the change in your condition. Competitors that once challenged your territorial claims now maintain respectful distances, perhaps recognizing that harassing an aging legend serves no useful purpose. Even predators appear to assess you differently, understanding instinctively that hunting such experienced prey would require perfect conditions and flawless execution. Your final winter arrives with weather that, while not as severe as the previous year, challenges your diminished reserves in ways that make survival uncertain. Your body responds sluggishly to cold stress, requiring enormous energy expenditure to maintain core temperature. Your movement becomes painful and limited as joints that have carried you through countless challenges finally begin failing under the accumulated wear of an impossibly demanding lifestyle. You find yourself spending entire days in sheltered locations, emerging only when absolutely necessary to access food or water. Your feeding becomes mechanical, focused entirely on meeting minimum caloric requirements, rather than optimizing nutrition or enjoying the complex flavors that once made meals satisfying. You're running on reserves that you know won't last indefinitely. One morning in late winter, you wake to find that your legs won't support your weight properly. The joints that have carried you across thousands of kilometers of challenging terrain have finally reached their mechanical limits. Standing requires enormous effort, and walking becomes an exercise in controlled falling rather than purposeful movement. You manage to reach a small pool where you've drunk safely for years, but the effort exhausts you completely. As you lower your head to the water's surface, you catch your reflection in the still liquid. The face looking back at you shows the accumulated wisdom of nearly 2 decades spent mastering impossible challenges, but also the inevitable toll that such a life extracts from even the most resilient survivors. You drink slowly, savoring water that tastes exactly as it did during your first nervous sip as a juvenile learning to navigate this complex world. The wetland around you looks the same as it always has, though you know it has changed completely during your lifetime. The rhythms of life continue regardless of any individual's participation, just as they did before your birth and will long after your passing. As you lift your head from the water, a movement catches your eye. It's a young water deer, probably in his first year of independence, approaching the opposite side of the pool with the nervous caution that you remember from your own early experiences. He sees you and freezes, uncertain whether to flee or attempt to share the resource. You don't move to challenge him or drive him away. Instead, you simply continue drinking, demonstrating through your calm behavior that the water source is large enough for both users. The young male watches you carefully, perhaps recognizing something in your bearing that marks you as different from the competitive adults he's encountered before. He approaches the water slowly, maintaining maximum distance while satisfying his thirst. His technique is clumsy but effective, showing the basic competence that might allow him to survive his first year if he learns quickly enough. As he drinks, he continues watching you, perhaps sensing that proximity to your experience might provide some protection or advantage. When both of you have finished drinking, you begin the slow journey back to your resting spot. The young male follows at a distance, not quite stalking, but clearly interested in observing your movement patterns and destination choices. You allow this shadowing understanding that your example might provide crucial education for an animal just beginning to learn the complexities of wetland survival. You reach a sheltered depression surrounded by dense vegetation that provides protection from wind and concealment from predators. It's a spot you've used for years, refined and improved through careful modification of the surrounding growth. As you settle into the familiar depression, you feel the accumulated fatigue of a lifetime spent in constant motion and perpetual alertness. The young male positions himself nearby, close enough to benefit from your presence, but far enough away to avoid triggering territorial responses. His behavior suggests intelligence and respect, qualities that might serve him well if he survives long enough to develop them fully. You close your eyes and rest, listening to the familiar sounds of the wetland around you. When you wake hours later, the light has changed and the air has grown colder. Your body feels heavier than before, as if the simple act of resting has somehow increased rather than restored your energy reserves. The young male is still nearby, apparently having spent the day observing your resting techniques and security precautions. You attempt to stand but find that your legs won't respond properly. The mechanical failure that you've been fighting for weeks has finally progressed beyond your ability to compensate. You're not in pain exactly, just profoundly tired in ways that sleep can no longer address. Your body has simply reached the end of its operational lifespan. The young male approaches cautiously, perhaps sensing that something fundamental has changed. He stops just outside what would normally be your personal space, tilting his head as if trying to understand what he's observing. His presence is oddly comforting, suggesting that your legacy might continue through the lessons he's absorbed during these final hours. As evening approaches, you settle more deeply into your resting spot, feeling the familiar rhythms of the wetland settling into night mode around you. The sounds that once required constant analysis for threat assessment now serve as a peaceful soundtrack to your final rest. Frogs calling from hidden pools, night birds beginning their hunting activities, the gentle movement of water through reed beds. You've lived an impossible life in an environment designed to eliminate the unwary. Your survival has transcended normal biological expectations to become something approaching legend. The knowledge you've accumulated, the techniques you've developed, the adaptations you've pioneered represent valuable information for your species' future survival in an increasingly challenging world. Your breathing becomes slower and more labored as your body's systems begin shutting down in the natural order that marks the end of all animal lives. But there's no panic, no desperate struggle against the inevitable. You've faced death countless times during your nearly 2 decades of wetland existence, always finding ways to postpone the encounter through skill, luck, and determination. This time, you're simply too tired to fight anymore. The young male maintains his vigil nearby, perhaps understanding instinctively that he's witnessing something significant. Your example during these final hours might influence his own survival strategies for years to come, passing along lessons that could prove crucial when he faces his own impossible challenges. As darkness settles over the wetland, you close your eyes one final time, listening to the eternal sounds of life continuing around you. Your remarkable journey ends where it began, surrounded by the complex ecosystem that shaped every day of your extraordinary existence. You've earned your rest through nearly 2 decades of successful survival in one of Earth's most demanding environments. The wetland will continue its endless cycle of change and challenge long after your passing. Other deer will learn to navigate its dangers and exploit its opportunities. Some will succeed, others will fail, all following the relentless logic of natural selection that governs life in environments that offer no guarantees except the certainty of constant testing. Your legacy lives not just in your offspring, but in the proof you provided that survival is possible for those willing to learn, adapt, and persevere against overwhelming odds. Life as a water deer might be impossibly difficult, but you've demonstrated that with enough patience, intelligence, and determination, even the harshest environments can be mastered by those brave enough to call them home. Here you can find the next video. Until then, see you soon.